Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into one of history's most brutal jobs, standing guard on a medieval castle wall in the dead of winter. Picture this, it's 2 a.m. in January somewhere in northern England around 1350. The temperature has dropped well below freezing. You're standing on an exposed stone battlement wind slicing through every gap in your clothing, and your shift doesn't end for another 2 hours. The darkness is so complete that you can barely see your own breath, which by the way is freezing into tiny crystals before it even dissipates. Your fingers have gone numb inside your gloves. Your toes stopped sending signals to your brain an hour ago. And here's the thing that really puts this into perspective: you probably won't survive the winter. Not you specifically, but someone in your guard rotation won't see spring. Every castle garrison lost men to the cold, and the strange part is that history barely remembers them. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Drop a comment with where you're watching from and what time it is for you. I always love seeing how global this little bedtime community has become. Now dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You've been assigned to the night watch at a mid-sized castle, not a grand royal fortress, but a working military installation owned by a minor lord. The castle sits on a hillside designed to catch every wind that rolls across the valley. During summer, this is a blessing. The breeze keeps the interior from becoming unbearable, pushes smoke from cooking fires away from living quarters, and generally makes life tolerable. During winter, that same architectural feature becomes a systematic torture device. Every opening, every arrow slit, every gap between stones becomes a corridor for wind that feels like it's been sharpened to a blade's edge. The stone walls that protect you from enemies also imprison cold. Medieval builders understood defense, but thermal dynamics remained a mystery wrapped in an enigma. These walls are typically 8 to 12 feet thick at the base. Impressive fortification, terrible insulation. Stone absorbs cold during winter nights and radiates it inward. By January, the walls themselves become part of the enemy. You can actually watch frost form on the interior surfaces of chambers. People wake up to find ice crystals on the inside of their bedroom walls. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood why this happened or simply accepted it as one more mysterious hardship from God. Your watch begins at midnight. You've been sleeping or attempting to sleep in the great hall with about 30 other men all pressed together near the massive central hearth. The fire has been banked for the night, reduced to glowing coals that provide more psychological comfort than actual heat. The warmth extends maybe 6 feet from the hearth itself. Beyond that, the temperature drops precipitously. You've been lying there in your clothes covered by a heavy woolen blanket that smells of smoke sweat and the unnamed oils of countless previous users. Your body has finally reached something approaching warmth when the previous watch shakes your shoulder. Up, he whispers, his breath visible even here, 20 feet from the only heat source in the building. Your turn? There's no groaning, no complaining. Everyone knows the rules. You rise careful not to disturb the men sleeping beside you. Their body heat is precious, and they'll resent you for letting cold air into the cocoon you've all created together. You pull on the additional layers you'd arranged nearby: another wool tunic, a leather jerkin, a cloak that's supposedly lined with rabbit fur, but might just be particularly fuzzy wool. Everything is damp, not soaking wet, just perpetually moist, from the ambient humidity of too many breathing bodies in an enclosed space. Medieval castles exist in a constant state of dampness from October through April. You pick up your spear, the shaft is so cold it burns your palm, and follow 3 other guards toward the narrow stone stairs that spiral up to the battlements. The stairwell is somehow colder than either the hall you're leaving or the exterior you're approaching. It exists in its own microclimate of misery, a stone throat that funnels every draught and creates wind where none should exist. Your boots scrape against steps worn smooth by generations of feet. Somewhere above you hear the wind howling like something alive and hungry. This is how your night begins. You have 4 hours of watch duty ahead of you, broken into 2 2-hour shifts with a brief respite in between. 4 hours during which your primary enemy isn't an invading army or a scaling ladder pressed against the walls. Your enemy is simply the air itself, the relentless cold that will spend the entire night trying to shut down your body one extremity at a time. The men you're relieving look like ghosts as you emerge onto the wall walk. Their faces are pinched lips, slightly blue eyes watering from the wind. One of them is doing a strange shuffling dance, shifting his weight from foot to foot in a rhythm that seems both random and purposeful. Another has his arms wrapped around his torso, hands jammed into his armpits. They barely acknowledge you before retreating toward the stairs, desperate for any warmth the great hall might offer. And now you're alone with the night, the stone, and the cold that will spend the next 2 hours trying to kill you as efficiently as any sword. The cold you're facing isn't the cold of a modern winter night where you dash from your heated car to your heated house. This is cold that lives with you inside you, that becomes part of your reality from November through March. Let's be precise about what you're dealing with on a typical January night. In medieval England or northern France, temperatures regularly drop to 20 degrees or lower. Factor in wind, chill, a concept medieval people didn't have words for, but absolutely understood, and the effective temperature on an exposed castle wall can feel like it's near zero. You're standing in what amounts to a stone refrigerator with the door open. Your body's already beginning the cascade of responses that will define your night. Within minutes of exposure, blood vessels in your extremities constrict, pulling warmth toward your core. This is your body making a calculated decision, sacrifice the fingers and toes to keep the heart and brain alive. You can feel it happening. Your fingertips start to ache with a deep bone-level pain that's your nerves screaming about reduced blood flow. Your toes have gone silent, which is somehow worse than pain. Silence means they're shutting down. The wind is the real killer. Still air, even cold air, can be managed because your body heat creates a thin insulating layer around your skin. Wind strips that away constantly, replacing warm air with fresh cold in an endless cycle. Medieval guards called it the blade wind, or the wolf breath. And they weren't being poetic, they were being literal. This wind cuts. It finds every gap in your clothing, every space where fabric doesn't quite overlap, and pours itself inside. The weave of your wool cloak, which seemed tight in daylight, becomes a sieve. Air moves through it like water through a net. The stone beneath your feet is conducting cold directly through your leather boots. Medieval footwear, even the better quality stuff issued to castle guards, offers minimal insulation. Your boots are essentially shaped leather bags with thin wooden or rope soles. They're designed to be durable and protective against mud water and rough terrain, not against cold. The stone is so cold that it feels almost hot, that paradoxical sensation where extreme cold registers as burning. Within 10 minutes, you can't feel the bottoms of your feet at all. They become numb clubs at the ends of your legs. Here's something that doesn't show up in most historical accounts: the moisture problem. Your breath, your sweat, even in freezing temperatures, you're sweating from the exertion of staying upright and alert. All this moisture has nowhere to go. It condenses on the inside of your clothing layers, turning fabric damp, and damp fabric loses about 90% of its insulating capacity. So your own body is sabotaging your survival, creating wet layers that accelerate heat loss. This is why experienced guards change positions constantly, trying to air out their inner layers, flapping their cloaks like strange birds to vent moisture. Historians still argue whether medieval people understood the relationship between wet clothing and hypothermia, but the practical evidence suggests they figured it out through brutal trial and error. Guard rotations were designed partly around this moisture accumulation. You couldn't keep a man on the walls all night, not just because he'd fall asleep, but because his clothing would become so moisture-saturated that he'd essentially be wearing a cold, wet prison. The castle itself is working against you. Remember those massive stone walls. During the day, they absorb whatever minimal winter sunlight exists. At night, they radiate that coldness back out. The wall walk where you're standing is essentially a bridge between two massive cold storage units. Heat rises from the inhabited spaces below, but it dissipates long before reaching your elevation. You're in the coldest part of the entire structure by design. Height equals visibility equals security equals suffering. Look around you, though. In this darkness, looking is more about sensing than seeing. The stone battlements are covered in frost, not just a light dusting, but thick crystalline formations that have built up over weeks of freezing nights. In moonlight, they're beautiful, almost magical. In practical terms, they're markers of just how cold this environment is. Frost forms inside the castle too, in the upper chambers in the chapel, even in the Lord's private rooms when the fires go out. People wake up to find their blankets stiff with ice, where their breath condensed and froze overnight. There's a particular phenomenon that medieval people called chamber frost or room ice. In extremely cold conditions, the moisture from sleeping bodies breath sweat. The general humidity of human occupation freezes on the coldest surface available, usually the stone walls. By morning, interior walls can have ice layers a quarter-inch thick. Chronicles from the period mention noble women scraping frost off bedroom walls to melt for washing water. If it's that cold inside the inhabited chambers with their tapestries and closed shutters, imagine what you're experiencing out here on the exposed battlements. Your face is becoming a mask of ice. The moisture from your breath freezes on your beard if you have one on your face. If you don't, your eyelashes develop tiny ice crystals. Blinking becomes slightly difficult because your eyelids want to stick together. This isn't rare or unusual. This is every winter night. Medieval guards developed a habit of frequently touching their faces, rubbing their cheeks and noses, checking for the telltale hardness that indicates frostbite is beginning. You've been taught to watch for white patches on your companions' faces, the death-pale spots that mean flesh is freezing. The psychological impact of this cold is almost worse than the physical. You know you have 2 more hours. You know that the cold will only deepen as the night progresses toward that pre-dawn period when temperatures hit their lowest point. You know that men have died doing exactly what you're doing right now. Not in battle, not from enemy arrows, but simply from standing still too long, from sitting down for just a moment, from letting the cold win. And yet somehow most guards survived most nights. There were systems, strategies, tricks passed down through generations of frozen men. The question isn't why did some guards freeze to death, it's how did so many manage not to. Your survival starts with what you're wearing, and it's worth understanding exactly what's between you and death right now. Strip away the romantic images of gleaming armor and noble cloaks you're dressed in layers of practical, unglamorous fabric that represent centuries of trial and error in keeping human bodies functional in hostile conditions. Every piece serves a specific purpose, and leaving any single item behind could be the difference between finishing your watch and being carried down those stairs at dawn. Against your skin, you're wearing a linen undertunic. This seems counterintuitive. Why wear the thinnest, least warm fabric closest to your body? Because linen absorbs moisture. Your skin is constantly producing sweat even in freezing temperatures, and that moisture needs to go somewhere. Linen wicks it away from your skin into the outer layers where it can theoretically evaporate. A wool layer directly against skin would trap that moisture, keep it pressed against you, and accelerate your cooling. Medieval people didn't understand the science of moisture wicking, but they definitely understood that linen underneath wool on top was the survival formula. This undertunic is long, reaching past your thighs, providing an extra layer over areas where major blood vessels run close to the surface. Over the linen you have a wool tunic, not the soft merino wool of modern sweaters. This is medieval wool, still containing much of its natural lanolin, coarse and slightly oily to the touch. That lanolin makes the wool naturally water resistant and helps it retain warmth even when damp. Your wool tunic is thick, probably weighing 3 or 4 pounds, and it's long enough to cover your buttocks and upper thighs. The weave is tight but not perfect. You can see tiny gaps between threads when you hold it up to light, which is why you need multiple layers. This wool is your primary insulation, creating dead air spaces that trap body heat. Next comes the gambeson, or a quilted tunic, multiple layers of linen or wool fabric stitched together, sometimes with wool batting in between. This is actually a piece of armor designed to be worn under mail or alone as protection against blunt force trauma, but it serves double duty as winter insulation. The quilting creates dozens of small air pockets, and air is an excellent insulator when it's trapped and still. Your gambeson adds another 2 pounds of weight and makes you look considerably bulkier than you actually are. The restricted movement is annoying during summer drills, but welcomed in winter, less ability to move means less air circulation inside your clothing layers. Over all this, you wear a leather jerkin. Leather is wind-resistant in a way that fabric isn't. Those gaps in your wool weave, leather covers them, creating a shell that wind can't easily penetrate. The leather is stiff, treated with animal fats and oils that make it somewhat water-resistant, and it's cut to overlap in front, so there's no straight path for wind to follow. The jerkin extends down to mid-thigh and has a high collar that you can pull up to protect your neck. Medieval guards knew that the neck was a critical area. Major blood vessels running close to the surface mean heat loss here affects your entire core temperature. Your cloak is your final layer, and it's the most important single item you own. This isn't decorative, this is survival equipment. The cloak is wool, much heavier and more tightly woven than your tunic, and it's large enough to wrap completely around your body with overlap. When you stand still, you can pull this cloak around yourself, covering your front entirely, and create a relatively sheltered microclimate inside. The cloak is treated with lanolin or beeswax to make it water-resistant, though resistant is a generous term. It delays moisture penetration rather than preventing it. Some guards have cloaks with hoods lined with fur, though in your case it's just extra wool. The hood is deep enough to protect your face when you turn away from the wind. Historians still argue whether guards wore mail during routine night watches in winter. Full mail would add 20 to 30 pounds and conduct cold directly to your body. Metal at freezing temperatures is dangerous to touch with bare skin. Most evidence suggests that unless attack was imminent, winter guards wore only the padded and leather layers, saving the mail for genuine military situations. Staying alive through the night took precedence over being fully armoured against an unlikely assault. Your hands present a particular problem. You need dexterity to hold your spear, to grab your sword if necessary, to signal to other guards. But exposed hands lose heat rapidly. The compromise is wool mittens with a slit that allows your fingers to emerge when needed. When you're just standing watch, your hands stay mittened. When you need to grip a weapon properly, you expose your fingers for the minimum time necessary. Some guards keep their hands jammed into their armpits between tasks using their own core heat to keep fingers functional. It looks undignified, but dignity doesn't keep you alive. Your legs are covered in wool hose, thick, almost felted wool that fits relatively tightly from foot to thigh. Over these you might have wool leg wraps, strips of fabric wound from ankle to knee, adding another insulating layer and protecting against wind that comes under your tunic. Medieval people understood that keeping legs warm was critical. Major muscle groups in the thighs and calves generate significant body heat when they're functioning properly, but they need protection to maintain that heat production. Footwear is your weak point. Your boots are leather-lined with wool or fur if you're fortunate, stuffed with straw if you're not. The soles are thin, thick. Soles weren't really a thing yet. Some guards wrap their feet in wool before putting boots on, creating extra insulation. But this makes the boots tighter and can restrict blood flow, which creates its own problems. There's no perfect solution. Your feet are going to get cold. The best you can hope for is managing how cold and for how long. Around your neck you have a wool scarf that you can pull up over your mouth and nose. Breathing extremely cold air directly can damage your lungs. Medieval people didn't know about lung tissue freezing, but they knew that breathing winter air without protection made people sick and sometimes killed them. The scarf warms and humidifies the air before it enters your lungs. It also becomes damp from your breath, then freezes into a crusty, uncomfortable mess. But that's still better than unfiltered cold air. Everything you're wearing weighs somewhere between 20 and 30 pounds total. You're bulky, restricted, and moving through this many layers takes effort. But each layer is a barrier against the cold that's trying to shut down your body. Take away any single piece, and your survival time drops measurably. This isn't fashion. This is engineering the accumulated wisdom of countless frozen guards who figured out piece by piece what keeps a human alive on a winter wall. And even with all of this, you're still cold. These layers buy you time, keep you functional, prevent immediate death. They don't make you comfortable. Comfort isn't part of the equation. 20 feet along the wall walk from your position, you can see a small orange glow, your lifeline, your companion, your reason for hope. It's a brazier, a metal basket about 2 feet across raised on legs to keep it off the stone filled with burning charcoal. This single object might be the most important piece of equipment on the entire walled night, more valuable in practical terms than any sword or spear. Men have fought over access to braziers. Guards have been disciplined for hoarding them. The warmth they provide isn't just comfort, it's the difference between finishing your watch and being found frozen at dawn. Let's talk about what a brazier actually is, because these weren't fancy pieces of metalwork. Picture a wide, shallow iron basket perforated with holes to allow air circulation, sitting on a tripod of iron legs maybe 6 inches tall. The whole thing weighs perhaps 15 pounds when empty. It's portable theoretically, though moving a brazier full of hot coals is an adventure you'd prefer to avoid. The iron is thick enough to contain heat without warping immediately, but thin enough that you can see it glowing dull red when the coals are particularly hot. These braziers are expensive. Iron is valuable, so each castle has a limited number, maybe one brazier per 30 feet of wall walk, and they're guarded jealously. Inside your brazier, charcoal burns with that peculiar smokeless heat that makes it ideal for indoor or semi-enclosed use. Wood smoke would choke you on the walls, especially when wind shifts direction, but charcoal produces mostly heat and carbon monoxide, which is dangerous in enclosed spaces but dissipates harmlessly out here in the open air. The charcoal itself comes from the castle's own production. Wood slowly burned in covered pits until it becomes these black lightweight chunks that burn hotter and longer than raw wood ever could. A single brazier load of charcoal can last 4 to 6 hours if managed properly, which is exactly the length of a night watch rotation. You approach the brazier carefully as you've been trained. Getting too close too quickly after being in extreme cold can cause problems medieval people didn't know about after drop or rapid rewarming dangers, but they knew from experience that thawing frozen hands directly over flame led to severe pain and sometimes permanent damage. You stop about 2 feet away, close enough to feel genuine warmth radiating from the coals, far enough that you're not cooking yourself. The heat on your face is glorious. You can feel your cheek starting to tingle as blood flow returns. Your eyes water slightly, though whether from relief wind or the heat differential, you're not sure. Here's the cruel mathematics of brazier warmth. Effective heat radiation extends maybe 3 to 4 feet in still air. Factor in wind, and that distance shrinks to perhaps 18 inches on the windward side while extending slightly farther on the leeward side. So you have these tiny islands of warmth scattered along the wall walk, separated by stretches of deadly cold. Your patrol route takes you past 3 different braziers, which means you spend perhaps 5 minutes per hour actually within warming range, and the rest of your time simply enduring. The braziers aren't evenly distributed. They're placed strategically at positions where guards must spend extended time near gates at corners, where 2 wall sections meet at spots overlooking particularly vulnerable approaches. This means some patrol routes have better brazier access than others, which is where castle social hierarchy comes into play. Senior guardsmen with more experience or better connections claim the routes with more frequent warmth exposure. Newer guards like you get the longer cold stretches. Nobody says this explicitly, it's just understood and forced through social pressure, and occasionally through fists in the barracks. You hold your hands over the brazier palms, down fingers spread. The heat feels like it's burning, even though objectively you know the distance is safe. That's the sensation of frozen flesh remembering what warmth feels like. You rotate your hands, warming one side, then the other. Medieval guards developed a whole ritual around brazier warming hands first, then turn and warm your face, rotate again to warm your back, then step away before you start sweating. Sweat is death. Remember, it soaks your inner layers and condemns you to worse cold when you move away from the heat source. Historians still argue whether the psychological benefit of braziers outweighed their practical warmth. The actual heat provided is minimal compared to the cold you're fighting, but having something to look forward to, a goal to reach on each circuit of your patrol route, keeps you moving and mentally engaged. Depression and despair. Kill as surely as hypothermia, maybe more surely, because a man who gives up stops moving. And stopping movement in this cold means dying. The charcoal supply is monitored carefully. Each brazier is assigned to a specific guard who's responsible for managing the fuel. You add fresh charcoal when the glow starts to dim using a small iron scoop to transfer pieces from a covered bucket kept nearby. Add too much at once, and you waste precious fuel. Add too little, and the brazier dies, and relighting it from scratch in winter wind is nearly impossible. The skill lies in maintaining a consistent burn rate throughout your entire watch. Experienced guards can judge remaining burn time just by looking at the coal bed's colour and listening to the subtle crackling sounds it makes. There are unwritten rules about brazier use. You don't linger. You warm yourself enough to restore some function, then you move on so the next patrol can benefit. Hogging a brazier standing there soaking up heat while others freeze is one of the fastest ways to become an outcast in the guard community. These men are your survival network, and alienating them over brazier time is suicidal in the long term. So you take your allotted minute or two, feel your fingers remember how to bend, let your face thaw enough that you can feel your nose again, and then you step away. The brazier also serves as a gathering point. When 2 guards' patrol routes intersect, it's usually near a brazier. You exchange a few words. Cold enough. Could be worse, though it really couldn't, and then move on. These brief encounters are part of the accountability system. If you don't appear at the brazier when expected, your partner knows something is wrong. Maybe you've fallen. Maybe you've frozen to a wall. Maybe you've simply gotten disoriented in the darkness. Either way, the alarm gets raised. At the brazier near the gatehouse, there's a small iron pot nestled in the coals. Inside, someone has put ale mixed with water heated almost to boiling. This is communal property. Any guard can take a cup when they pass by. The hot liquid does more than warm your insides. It provides calories, a bit of alcohol for courage, and most importantly, it raises your core temperature directly. You ladle some into a small leather cup you carry. Drink it in careful sips so you don't burn your mouth and feel warmth spreading through your chest like a slow sunrise. The brazier will burn through the night, a constant presence, a promise that warmth still exists in the world even when your body forgets. You'll return to it 6 or 7 times before your watch ends, each visit a small resurrection, each departure a small death. This is the rhythm of your night cold walk, cold walk, warmth. The brazier is the beating heart of that rhythm, the pulse that keeps you alive. You can't just stand in one place all night, even with a brazier nearby. Static guards are dead guards, literally. Your watch involves constant movement, a carefully choreographed pattern that's been refined over generations of frozen men learning what keeps bodies functional. The castle's defensive perimeter is divided into sections, and you've been assigned a stretch of wall walk approximately 60 feet long from one corner tower to a point halfway along the curtain wall. This is your domain for the next 2 hours, your personal strip of freezing purgatory. Your patrol pattern follows a specific route. You walk from your starting point at the tower, moving at a deliberate pace, not rushed, not dawdling toward the far end of your section. The walk takes perhaps 30 seconds. At the far end, you scan the darkness beyond the walls for any sign of movement or threat count to 10, then turn and walk back. The entire circuit takes roughly 2 minutes, which means you'll complete this loop about 60 times during your 2-hour shift. 60 times up, 60 times back, 60 times trying to convince your legs to keep moving when they're screaming for rest. But here's the thing, this movement isn't just about surveillance. It's about survival. Walking generates heat. Your leg muscles, particularly the large muscles in your thighs and calves, are metabolic furnaces when they're working. Each step produces warmth that radiates through your body, keeping your core temperature from dropping into dangerous territory. Medieval guards didn't understand cellular respiration or metabolic heat production, but they absolutely understood that standing still meant freezing, and moving meant living. The pace matters. Walk too fast and you start sweating, which soaks your inner layers and creates that deadly moisture problem we talked about earlier. Walk too slow and you don't generate enough heat to compensate for what you're losing to the environment. The optimal speed is what modern military trainers might call a patrol pace, steady, sustainable, efficient. You're not strolling, but you're not marching either. You're moving with purpose each step, deliberate, your arms swinging slightly, to keep them from going completely numb. Every 3rd or 4th circuit you vary the pattern slightly, you stop at different points along your route, you change your scanning pattern, you alter your timing. This isn't just tactical though. Unpredictability does make you a harder target for hypothetical enemies. It's neurological. Performing the exact same movement in the exact same rhythm for 2 hours straight induces a trance state, and trance states lead to mistakes. You might step too close to the edge, you might miss a patch of ice, you might simply zone out so completely that you stop registering the cold, which is when hypothermia really takes hold. Variation keeps your mind engaged, and an engaged mind keeps you alive. Your fellow guard assigned to the adjacent section of wall is performing his own patrol pattern. Every few minutes your paths intersect at the boundary between your territories. You exchange a nod, sometimes a word or two, holding up, "I," and then continue in opposite directions. This intersection isn't accidental, it's a built-in accountability system. If you don't appear when expected, your partner knows something has gone wrong. Maybe you've slipped on ice. Maybe hypothermia has progressed far enough that you're becoming confused and disoriented. Maybe you've simply sat down for just a moment and won't be getting back up without help. Historians still argue whether these patrol patterns were formally mandated or organically developed through practical experience. Written records from castle constables mention proper watchkeeping and diligent circuits, but they rarely specify exact distances or timings. Most likely each castle developed its own patterns based on wall length number of guards available and local conditions. What's certain is that by the 14th century every experienced guard knew that movement equaled survival. When you reach your designated brazier, that blessed spot roughly in the middle of your patrol route, you allow yourself to stop for perhaps 90 seconds. You hold your hands over the coals, rotate to warm different parts of your body, maybe take a sip of whatever hot liquid is available. This brief pause is carefully calibrated, long enough to restore some function to your extremities, short enough that your muscles don't cool down completely. Starting to move again after a longer rest is agonizing. Your muscles have stiffened, your joints have tightened, and those first few steps feel like walking on broken glass. Better to keep the stops brief. Between brazier stops, you perform small movements constantly. You flex your fingers inside your mittens, making fists and releasing them, keeping blood flowing to your hands. You rotate your shoulders, roll your neck, wiggle your toes inside your boots, even though you can't feel them anymore. You clench and release your jaw muscles. Every few minutes you do a quick squat, just dipping your body down and up again to force blood through your legs. These micro-movements look absurd to outside observers, but they're essential. They're the difference between finishing your watch on your feet and being carried down the stairs. There's a peculiar exercise that experienced guards teach newcomers, the guard dance. It's not actually dancing, more like a series of controlled movements performed while staying mostly in place. You lift one knee high, hold it for a count of 3, lower it slowly. Then the other knee. You do a small twist at the waist, bringing your shoulders around while your feet stay planted. You raise up on your toes, hold lower down. The whole sequence takes maybe 30 seconds and looks completely ridiculous. But it engages nearly every major muscle group, generates a burst of heat, and can be performed even in the limited space of the wall walk without abandoning your post. Your spear isn't just a weapon, it's also a walking stick, a balance aid and a tool for testing footing in darkness. You plant it with each step, using it to probe ahead for ice patches or loose stones. Medieval wall walks weren't maintained to modern safety standards. Gaps in paving stones, slick, moss-accumulated ice. All these hazards are invisible in the darkness. Your spear tip clicking against stone gives you information about what's ahead before you commit your full weight to that step. Falling from a wall walk isn't common, but it happens, and in winter the consequences are usually fatal. Around the 1-hour mark of your shift, you start to notice your pace slowing involuntarily. Your body is trying to conserve energy to reduce heat production because the metabolic cost is becoming unsustainable. This is when discipline matters most. You consciously force yourself to maintain pace, counting steps if necessary, focusing on putting one foot in front of the other with deliberate regularity. This is also when the mental games begin. You start promising yourself rewards. Just reach the brazier one more time. Just complete 10 more circuits. Just make it through 30 more minutes. Small goals, achievable goals that keep you moving when every fibre of your being wants to stop. The rotation system means that after 2 hours you'll be relieved and sent to a warming area for a break before potentially returning for another shift. But those 2 hours stretch out like an eternity. Time becomes elastic in the cold. Each circuit feels longer than the last. Each return to the brazier seems to take forever. And yet, paradoxically, you need to stay alert to remain capable of actually performing guard duty, because while freezing to death is a real concern, failing to spot an actual threat is a career-ending or life-ending mistake. So you walk and walk and walk some more. Your legs become mechanical, moving through sheer habit rather than conscious will. And somehow, impossibly, you keep going. Not all guard positions are created equal, and if you're lucky or senior enough or well-connected enough, you might find yourself assigned to the gatehouse rather than the open wall walk. The gatehouse is the premium, posting the spot every guard hopes for on winter nights, and understanding why reveals a lot about medieval castle design and the creative ways men found to stay alive in stone buildings. The gatehouse is typically a multi-story structure built directly over and around the main entrance to the castle. It's thick, massively fortified, and crucially for your survival it's enclosed. While the open wall walks expose you to every breath of wind, the gatehouse has actual rooms, chambers where guards can station themselves while still maintaining defensive readiness. These rooms have doors, shutters over arrow slits, and most importantly they retain heat in ways that open battlements simply cannot. Picture the layout. The ground floor contains the gate mechanism itself, the massive wooden doors reinforced with iron, and the portcullis, that heavy iron grating that drops down to seal the entrance. The second floor where you might be stationed is the guard chamber. It's not large, maybe 12 feet square, with arrow slits facing outward in multiple directions, and a murder hole in the floor that allows guards to drop unpleasant things on anyone trying to force the gate below. The ceiling is low, maybe 7 feet, which means less air volume to heat. Medieval builders didn't plan this for thermal efficiency, but the effect is the same: smaller spaces stay warmer. The walls here are just as thick as elsewhere in the castle, typically 8 to 10 feet of solid stone. But here's the crucial difference: the gatehouse has residual heat. During the day, this space sees constant traffic. Guards coming and going, people entering and leaving the castle, horses being led through carts being inspected. All this activity generates warmth. Human bodies are surprisingly good heaters. Each person produces about the same heat as a 100-watt light bulb. Over the course of a day, dozens of people pass through, leaving their thermal signature. The stone absorbs this warmth and releases it slowly overnight. More importantly, the gatehouse usually has its own small brazier that's not exposed to wind. In your guard chamber, there's a metal basket sitting on the stone floor filled with glowing charcoal, and because you're in an enclosed space, that heat doesn't just radiate briefly before the wind steals it. It fills the room. The air itself becomes warm, not hot, not even truly comfortable by modern standards, but genuinely warm. You can take off your mittens and actually use your hands for delicate tasks. You can sit on a wooden bench without the cold stone immediately draining your body heat through 6 layers of clothing. Historians still argue whether gatehouse assignments were formally recognised as easier duty, or if the advantage was just quietly understood. Records of guard rotations suggest that experienced men, those with seniority or particular favour from the castle, constables somehow ended up at the gatehouse more often during winter months. Young guards, new arrivals, men who displeased their commanders, these found themselves on the exposed walls. Nobody wrote down, Jones gets the gatehouse because his uncle is the marshal, but the patterns in surviving duty rosters suggest exactly that kind of arrangement. The gatehouse position isn't just about personal comfort. There are legitimate tactical reasons for putting reliable, experienced guards here. The main gate is the castle's most vulnerable point, the spot where any assault would likely focus. You need alert, functional guards here, not half-frozen men who can barely hold their weapons. So there's a convenient alignment between military necessity and human survival needs. The best guards should be at the gate. The best guards also deserve better conditions. Everyone wins, especially if you're one of those best guards. Your duties at the gatehouse are different from wall patrol. You're not walking circuits. You're stationed in the guard chamber, watching through arrow slits, listening for any sound of approach. One guard might be positioned at the murder hole periodically, checking the gate below. Another at the window facing the approach road. You can rotate positions every 15 or 20 minutes, moving between observation points, but you're essentially stationary. This should be more dangerous from a hypothermia standpoint. Less movement means less metabolic heat, but the enclosed space with its residual warmth and wind-protected brazier more than compensates. You can actually have conversations here. On the open walls, the wind makes talking difficult. You have to shout, and sustained shouting in freezing air hurts your throat and lungs. In the gatehouse, normal speaking voices work fine. Guards tell stories, share gossip from the castle, discuss which kitchen maid smiled at, whom speculate about whether the Lord will actually pay wages on time this month. This social interaction is another survival factor that doesn't appear in military manuals but matters enormously. Talking keeps your mind engaged, prevents the dangerous drift into cold-induced confusion, and maintains group cohesion that might save your life later. The gatehouse also offers access to hot food and drink more readily than the walls. The kitchen isn't far, and there's usually a designated runner, often the youngest or most junior guard, whose job includes fetching hot ale, bringing bread, keeping the brazier supplied with charcoal. On the walls, you're largely on your own between official relief times. At the gatehouse, the logistics of keeping guards functional are just easier. There's a wooden bench built into one wall of the guard chamber, and here's where discipline becomes crucial. That bench is tempting. You've been standing for an hour, your legs ache, your back hurts, and there's a perfectly good seat right there. But sitting for extended periods in the cold, even in the relatively warm gatehouse, is dangerous. Your large leg muscles stop generating heat. Your body temperature drops. What starts as a brief rest can become fatal drowsiness. Experienced guards have a rule: you can sit for 5 minutes no more, and someone else must be awake and watching you. After 5 minutes, you stand up again, stamp your feet, shake off the creeping lethargy. The gatehouse position also means you're first in line if something actually happens. If there's an alarm, if someone approaches the castle, if there's any kind of incident, you're the immediate response. This sounds like a disadvantage until you consider that any real action means movement, engagement, adrenaline, all things that generate warmth and break the monotony of standing watch. In a perverse way, a minor crisis on a winter night can be almost welcome because it makes you feel alive and warm again. Nobody admits this out loud, but you see it in how quickly guards respond to any unusual sound, almost eager for something to happen. The murder hole in the floor isn't just for defense, it's also a heat source of sorts. Warm air from the ground level, where animals and activity generate some heat, rises through that opening. It's not much, just a slight temperature differential, but on a freezing night you can literally feel warmer air coming up from below. Guards unconsciously position themselves near that opening, absorbing whatever minor benefit it provides. If you're assigned to the gatehouse on a winter night, you've won the lottery, relatively speaking. You'll still be cold, still uncomfortable, still counting the minutes until your relief arrives, but you'll have use of your hands. You'll be able to think clearly, and you'll almost certainly survive the night without frostbite or worse. For a medieval guard in January, that's about as good as it gets. Standing still kills. This is the fundamental truth every guard learns, usually from watching what happens to men who forget it. Your body is a furnace, but it only burns hot when you feed it with movement. So even when you're cold, even when every muscle aches, even when moving seems like more effort than you can possibly muster, you move. You move because stopping means dying, and between those two options, movement suddenly seems a lot more appealing. We've talked about patrol routes, but let's get specific about the actual movements that keep you alive. The basic walk is your foundation, steady, continuous, purposeful. But experienced guards layer additional movements on top of that baseline, creating a repertoire of exercises that can be performed without abandoning your post or appearing to neglect your duties. Because here's the thing, you need to look like you're still an effective guard. If the sergeant of the watch walks past and sees you doing jumping jacks, you're going to have problems. So these movements are subtle defensible as part of normal guard duties, but secretly designed to keep your blood flowing. The spear drill is your most versatile tool. Every few minutes you perform a quick weapon check, perfectly legitimate guard behavior. You shift the spear from your right hand to your left, feeling the weight testing your grip. You raise it to a ready position, as if you've heard something suspicious holding it there for a 10 count, before lowering it again. You plant the butt against the ground and do a slow rotation around it, scanning in all directions, which happens to involve turning your entire body and engaging your core muscles. You lift it horizontal and sight down the shaft, checking for straightness, which requires raising your arms above your head and holding them there. The genius of the spear drill is that anyone watching sees a diligent guard maintaining weapons readiness. What they don't see is that you've just engaged your shoulders, arms, back and core in a sequence of movements that's generating significant heat. You can perform this drill once every 5 or 6 minutes without it looking strange. That's 12 times per hour, 12 bursts of metabolic activity, 12 moments when your body temperature ticks upward instead of steadily declining. Then there's the checking your footing routine. You're on a potentially icy stone surface in darkness. Of course, you need to verify your footing regularly. This involves a slow, deliberate march in place, lifting each knee high, placing each foot down, carefully testing the ground. To an observer, you're being cautious and professional. To your cardiovascular system, you're doing a low-impact cardio exercise that forces blood through your legs and into your feet. You can do this for 30 seconds at a time, multiple times per circuit, and nobody questions it. Weapon maintenance provides another opportunity. You periodically inspect your sword. If you're carrying one, drawing it partially from its sheath, checking the blade, ensuring it hasn't frozen to the scabbard, then resheathing it. This involves arm movements, shoulder rotations, and core engagement. You adjust your belt, tighten straps, rearrange your cloak, all movements that look like routine gear adjustment, but actually serve to keep your arms and shoulders mobile. Medieval equipment was genuinely finicky enough that constant adjustment was often necessary, which makes these movements completely credible. The scanning pattern serves double duty. You're supposed to be watching for threats, which means regularly looking in all directions, including behind you. This provides legitimate excuse for constant motion. You walk to one end of your section, stop, perform a slow 360-degree turn, scanning the darkness. Then you walk back, stop again, perform another rotation. You crane your neck upward, checking the stars for weather changes, perfectly reasonable, in an era when weather prediction involved looking at the sky. You lean slightly over the parapet, checking the wall face below for signs of anything, really. Climbers damage ice buildup. Each of these movements stretches different muscle groups and keeps your blood flowing. Historians still argue whether guards were formally trained in these movement patterns, or whether they developed organically through trial and error. Some medieval military manuals mention proper vigilance and maintaining readiness, but they don't specify the actual physical techniques. More likely, experienced guards taught newer men informally, "See how I'm doing this? Looks like I'm just checking my equipment right, but feel how warm you get after doing it for a minute." Knowledge passed down through demonstration and whispered advice in the barracks. Every 10 minutes or so you perform what we mentioned earlier, the guard dance. You've reached a point where you can't wait until you reach the brazier again. You need heat now, so you stop, plant your spear firmly and run through the sequence. Deep knee bends, just 2 or 3, but lowering yourself slowly and rising slowly, so your thigh muscles do maximum work. Toe raises up and down, awakening your calves. Shoulder rolls, big exaggerated circles that look like you're working out tension, but actually force blood into your arms. a torso twist rotating left and right, engaging your obliques and back muscles. The entire routine takes 45 seconds and makes you look slightly absurd, but it also raises your core temperature by a degree or more. Your arms are particularly vulnerable because they are extended, exposed, and doing relatively little work during normal patrol. So you develop habits. You swing them as you walk, big deliberate swings that look martial and purposeful. You periodically bring your hands together and rub them, vigorously friction-generating heat. You clap them together. The sound also serves to signal other guards that you're alert and functional. You jam them into your armpits for 30 seconds at a time, stealing warmth from your core. You make fists and release them fists, and release, keeping the muscles active and blood flowing. Breathing becomes a form of exercise too. In extreme cold, breathing naturally becomes shallow, your body trying to reduce heat loss through respiration. But shallow breathing means less oxygen, which means reduced metabolic function, which means less heat production. So you consciously take deep breaths, filling your lungs completely, then exhaling fully. You do this behind your scarf, so the moist air doesn't freeze your face, but you do it regularly. 10 deep breaths, once per circuit. It's oxygenating your blood and forcing your respiratory muscles to work, both of which generate warmth. The neck and head require special attention because you lose significant heat through your skull. You can't really exercise your head, but you can keep moving it. You rotate your neck, stretching in all directions, ostensibly checking for stiffness, but actually keeping blood flowing to your brain. You scrunch your face up, making exaggerated expressions, keeping your facial muscles active. You work your jaw, clenching and releasing. These movements look odd if anyone's watching closely, which is why you do them when you're at the far end of your patrol route, away from your partner and any observers. There's a particular exercise that guards learn for emergency situations when you realize you're getting genuinely hypothermic and need to generate heat immediately. You find a stretch of wall where you can't be seen from below, and you do burpees. Yes, medieval guards invented burpees or something very much like them. Drop to a squat, kick your legs back to a plank position, bring them forward again, stand up. This generates an enormous amount of heat very quickly, but it also looks completely unprofessional and makes you vulnerable for those few seconds. So it's reserved for genuine emergencies moments, when you realize that maintaining appearances matters less than staying alive. All these movements, all these exercises, they're designed to be sustainable. You can't sprint for 2 hours. You can't do intense calisthenics continuously. But you can incorporate constant moderate movement into your guard duties, disguising survival tactics as professional vigilance. And at the end of your 2-hour shift, you're exhausted, genuinely deeply tired from the constant motion, but you're alive, functional, and ready to stumble down to the warming area without being carried. Movement is medicine. Movement is survival. The guard who stands still is the guard who doesn't see morning. Around the 90-minute mark of your shift, something wonderful happens. The relief runner appears with the night rations. This isn't just food delivery, it's a calculated intervention in your body's losing battle against the cold. Your metabolism has been burning through calories at an accelerated rate for the past hour and a half, and without fuel, that furnace starts to sputter. The rations aren't about satisfying hunger, they're about keeping you alive long enough to finish your watch. The runner is usually the youngest guard, the newest recruit, someone who hasn't earned the right to a full watch position yet. He's moving quickly, partly because he's trying to stay warm himself, partly because he's carrying hot liquids that won't stay hot for long. He appears at your position with a wooden tray containing your allotment, a cup of hot liquid, a chunk of bread, maybe a piece of hard cheese or some dried meat. This isn't a meal, it's fuel carefully calibrated from centuries of experience about what keeps guards functional. The hot drink is your priority. In your cup there's ale that's been heated almost to boiling, mixed with spices and sometimes honey if the castle's stores are good. This isn't the recreational drinking that happens in the hall after dinner, this is medicinal, purposeful consumption. The liquid is still steaming when you receive it, and you can feel the heat radiating from the cup through your mittens. You bring it close to your face first, letting the steam warm your cheeks and nose, inhaling vapours that seem impossibly luxurious after breathing frigid air for 90 minutes. You drink in small sips, letting the heat spread through your mouth and down your throat. The sensation is almost painful. Your mouth has been so cold that the hot liquid feels scalding even when it's merely warm. But you persist, taking measured sips, feeling warmth bloom in your chest like a flower opening. This isn't just psychological comfort. This is a direct intervention in your core temperature. That hot liquid is raising your internal temperature from the inside out. doing what external braziers can only partially accomplish. The ale itself provides liquid calories that your body can absorb quickly, without needing to divert blood flow to your stomach for complex digestion. The alcohol content is low, maybe 3 or 4% enough to provide a slight vasodilating effect that helps blood flow to your extremities, but not enough to impair your judgment or reaction time. Medieval people didn't understand the pharmacology, but they knew from experience that weak hot ale kept guards warmer and more alert than water alone. The spices serve multiple purposes. Ginger, if available, genuinely does promote circulation. Modern science confirms what medieval cooks intuited. Cinnamon adds sweetness without requiring precious sugar. Pepper provides a burning sensation that tricks your brain into perceiving warmth, even beyond the actual temperature of the drink. Cloves have mild, analgesic properties, dulling the ache in your joints and extremities. The honey, when present, is pure, fast-burning fuel, simple sugars that hit your bloodstream quickly and provide an immediate energy boost. Historians still argue whether medieval castle kitchens had specific recipes for guard rations, or whether these drinks were made ad hoc from whatever was available. Some household accounts mention guard ale as a line item, suggesting systematic preparation. Other records just show increased ale consumption during winter months without specifics. What's certain is that by the 14th century most castles had established some system for providing hot drinks to night guards, because the alternative was finding frozen corpses at dawn. The bread you receive is dense, heavy, dark, made from a mixture of grains that's more about substance than flavour. This bread is perhaps 6 or 7 hours old, baked in the evening specifically for night rations. It's still relatively fresh, which matters because stale medieval bread can be hard enough to break teeth. You tear pieces off with your hands, your fingers are functional enough for this after holding the hot cup and chew slowly. The act of chewing itself generates heat, working your jaw muscles and forcing blood flow to your face. This bread is packed with calories. Medieval bread for working people wasn't the light, fluffy thing we're used to. It was basically compressed energy. A chunk the size of your fist might contain 400 or 500 calories, and every one of those calories is desperately needed. Your body has been operating in crisis mode, burning everything available to maintain core temperature. The bread replenishes those reserves, giving your metabolism something to work with for the final 30 minutes of your shift. The cheese, if you get it, is hard and aged the kind that doesn't spoil easily and can be stored in cold conditions without significant degradation. It's salty, which helps with fluid retention, and fatty, which provides slow-burning energy. You don't eat it all at once, you put a piece in your mouth and let it slowly dissolve, extending the experience and the caloric intake over several minutes. This also keeps your mouth occupied, your jaw, moving your face muscles active. Some guards get a piece of bacon or salt pork, small, maybe just an ounce, but incredibly dense with fat and protein. Eating fatty meat in extreme cold makes physiological sense. Fat provides more than twice the calories per gram compared to carbohydrates or protein. Your body can convert that fat into heat energy very efficiently. Medieval people didn't know about the Krebs cycle or fat metabolism, but they definitely understood that bacon made you warmer than bread alone. The timing of this ration delivery is crucial. Too early in your shift and you burn through the calories before the end, leaving you depleted during the most dangerous final period. Too late, and you don't have time to process and benefit from the nutrition. 90 minutes into a 2-hour shift is the sweet spot, enough time remaining to need the boost. Enough time elapsed that you're genuinely running on empty. While you eat and drink, you're allowed to pause your patrol briefly. You stand near your brazier, consuming your rations, and for 3 or 4 minutes life becomes almost bearable. You're stationary, but you're eating, which generates metabolic heat. You're near the fire, you have hot liquid in your hand and food in your belly. This moment, brief as it is what you've been mentally counting down to for the past hour. It's hope made manifest in a wooden cup and a chunk of bread. The runner doesn't linger. He has other guards to supply other positions along the walls where men are equally desperate for hot drinks and food. He collects your empty cup, it'll be refilled from the pot simmering in the kitchen and distributed to the next guard rotation, and disappears back down the stairs. You're alone again with the cold, but you're different now. You're fueled. Your internal fire has been stoked. You have the resources to make it through the final stretch. Some castles provide a second smaller ration, about 15 minutes before shift change, just a small cup of hot broth or ale, nothing solid. This final boost ensures that guards finish their watch strong, rather than limping to the end on fumes. Other castles can't afford this luxury and guards simply endure. But even in the poorest castles, that mid-watch hot drink is considered essential, not optional. The cost of providing heated ale is far less than the cost of replacing frozen guards. You finish your bread, lick your fingers to capture every last crumb of caloric value, and take your final sip of ale. The cup is empty but still warm. You hold it for a moment longer, stealing those last few seconds of warmth against your palms, before setting it down for the runner to collect on his next circuit. Then you wrap your cloak tighter, pick up your spear and resume your patrol. The food sits heavy in your stomach, a pleasant, reassuring weight. Your body is already breaking it down, converting bread and cheese and ale into the heat and energy you need to survive the next 30 minutes. And surprisingly and possibly, you feel almost good. Fed warmed from the inside, you face the final stretch of your watch with something approaching confidence. This is what hot food does in the cold. It doesn't just sustain you. It reminds you that you're human, that civilization exists, that somewhere in this castle there's a kitchen with a fire, and people who remember you're out here freezing. You're going to make it through the night. One more circuit, one more hour, one more watch. About 20 feet from your position, built into the wall itself, there's a stone bench. It's been there for decades, maybe centuries, carved directly from the battlement or constructed from the same stone as the walls. It's covered with a thin layer of ice now glinting slightly in the moonlight. That bench is one of the most dangerous objects on this entire wall, and every guard knows it. That bench has killed men. The temptation is enormous. You've been standing and walking for nearly 2 hours. Your legs ache with a deep, grinding pain that radiates from your feet, up through your knees and into your hips. Your back hurts from maintaining constant vigilance, from the weight of your layers, from the tension of staying alert. That bench offers rest relief, a chance to take the weight off your screaming muscles. Just for a minute, you think. Just 30 seconds to sit down. Nobody would blame you. You've earned it. This is how it starts. This is how guards die. Sitting down in extreme cold initiates a cascade of physiological changes that can quickly become fatal. When you're standing and moving, your large leg muscles, your quadriceps, hamstrings, calves are constantly working, generating metabolic heat that radiates through your body. These muscles are huge, comprising some of the largest tissue masses in your body, and when they're active, they're furnaces. When you sit, especially when you sit on a surface as cold as frozen stone, all that heat production stops. The stone itself is a heat sink, probably hovering around 20 degrees or colder. When you sit on it, even through multiple layers of clothing, heat conducts directly from your body into that frozen mass. It's like sitting on a block of ice, except ice actually insulates better than stone. The stone draws warmth from your buttocks, your thighs, your lower back, all areas where major blood vessels run close to the surface. As your blood circulates through these cooled areas, your core temperature begins dropping measurably. Within 5 minutes of sitting, your metabolic rate has decreased significantly. Your body, sensing that you're at rest, begins conservation mode. Your heart rate slows. Your breathing becomes shallower. Blood flow to your extremities decreases even further as your body prioritizes core functions. Meanwhile, the cold is working its way deeper into your tissues. What started as surface cooling is now affecting muscle tissue, then deeper structures. Your body temperature, which you fought so hard to maintain, begins a steady decline. The real danger is that sitting feels good. After the misery of standing and walking, the relief of taking weight off your feet is profound. Your brain releases endorphins, natural opioids that make you feel calm, relaxed, almost euphoric. This is your body rewarding you for resting, for conserving energy, for doing what feels right. Except what feels right in this context is deadly. You don't feel yourself getting colder. You don't notice as the hypothermia creeps deeper. You just feel peaceful, comfortable, sleepy. Historians still argue whether medieval guards understood the mechanism of cold-induced death, or simply knew empirically that sitting led to dying. Written warnings in castle regulations mention guards being found frozen to their posts, or taken by cold sleep. The language suggests they viewed it almost as a supernatural phenomenon, the cold as an active entity that claimed men who let their guard down. Metaphorically accurate even if the science is wrong. The bench is positioned ironically at what should be a convenient spot midway along the wall section, near a brazier, at a point where 2 guards' patrol routes intersect. It probably was installed with good intentions, maybe for daytime watch, when summer heat makes standing difficult, or for elderly guards who need periodic rest. But in winter, that bench becomes a trap. You can see old stains on the stone near places where candles or torches were set, where spilled wine or blood left permanent marks. Each stain might represent a guard who sat down and didn't get up. Your training, such as it was, included explicit warnings about the bench. Never sit, the sergeant told you. Standing is survival, sitting is dying. You sit down, you don't wake up. This seemed like exaggeration at the time, but now feeling the exhaustion in every muscle, understanding the seductive appeal of that stone seat, you realize it was literal truth. The bench has probably killed more guards than any enemy assault. There are protocols if you absolutely must sit. If your legs are genuinely failing, if you're on the verge of collapse, if standing another minute is impossible, then you can sit, but only with a partner, present only for a maximum of 3 minutes, and only if you're constantly moving your legs, flexing your muscles, keeping circulation active. Your partner's job is to watch you, to monitor your condition, to physically pull you up when time expires. Even then it's risky. Even with all precautions, sitting in extreme cold is gambling with your life. Some guards tie a rope around their waist, securing it to something solid before they allow themselves even this limited rest. The rope isn't to prevent falling, it's to ensure that if they become too cold confused to stand on their own, their partner can haul them up by force. This might seem paranoid until you learn that it's based on actual incidents, times when guards sat down and refused to stand, even when ordered, their hypothermic brains no longer capable of rational decision-making. The bench is also a test of discipline and willpower. Every time you walk past it, it whispers promises of relief. Just a moment, just a quick rest. You've been so good, so diligent. You deserve a break. This is your brain depleted of glucose and oxygen, trying to rationalize dangerous behavior. Resisting that voice circuit after circuit, walk after walk, is a constant exercise in self-control. Some guards count steps between bench passes. I walked past it 40 times tonight without sitting, turning resistance into a point of pride. Experienced guards develop a sort of superstitious relationship with the bench. They give it a wide berth as if sitting weren't a choice, but rather something the bench itself could force upon them. They touch their amulets or mutter prayers when passing it, religious gestures that make no logical sense, but provide psychological protection against temptation. Don't look at it. Don't think about it. Don't acknowledge that it exists. Just keep walking. There are stories, whether true or embellished, nobody's certain, about guards who sat down on quiet winter nights and were found the next morning frozen solid, still in sitting position, spear still in hand, eyes still open. The ice had to be chipped away from their clothing before their bodies could be moved. These stories circulate through the barracks, told in hushed voices, serving as cautionary tales that are probably more effective than any official regulation. The worst part is that the bench looks innocent. In daylight it's just a practical piece of castle furniture. In summer it's genuinely useful. There's nothing inherently dangerous about the object itself. It's only in the context of winter nights, exhausted guards and temperatures that can kill that this simple stone seat becomes lethal. Context is everything. So you walk past it again. You feel the pull, the desire, the aching need to rest. Your legs are screaming, your back is on fire. Every part of you wants to sit down for just 1 minute. Instead, you keep walking. You do another circuit. You force your legs to keep moving. You win this particular battle against the bench, and then 2 minutes later, you have to win it again and again and again. The bench will still be there when your shift ends. It'll be there tomorrow night and the night after and the night after that. It'll outlast you by centuries. But tonight at least you're not going to let it win. You're not alone out here even when it feels like you are. 30 feet away, moving through his own patrol pattern, is your watch partner. Let's call him Thomas, because he probably has a name like that, something common and unremarkable. Thomas is your lifeline tonight, and you're his. This isn't friendship necessarily, though it might become that. This is something more fundamental. Mutual survival, 2 men bound together by the simple fact that either both of you finish this watch alive or neither of you might. The partnered watch system isn't just about having someone to talk to during long cold hours. It's a carefully designed accountability mechanism that evolved through hard experience. A guard alone on the walls can fall free, succumb to hypothermia-induced confusion, or simply sit down and never get up, and nobody knows until it's too late. 2 guards watching each other means problems get caught early when they're still fixable. Thomas is monitoring you, and you're monitoring him in a constant low-level surveillance that might save both your lives. Every few minutes your patrol routes bring you into proximity. Sometimes you pass each other going opposite directions. Sometimes you meet at a designated point, usually near a brazier, and exchange a few words. These encounters follow a pattern that's become ritualized through repetition. "Holding up," one of you asks. "Are you?" the other responds. The actual words matter less than the exchange itself, proof that both parties are conscious, coherent, and functional. You're watching Thomas for specific signs of trouble. Is his gait steady or is he stumbling? Stumbling suggests loss of coordination, possibly early hypothermia. Is he maintaining his patrol pace or has he slowed down? Slowing without obvious reason indicates fatigue that might be crossing into dangerous territory. When you pass close enough to see his face, does he make eye contact? Eye contact means awareness. Vacant stares or inability to focus suggest cognitive impairment. Thomas is watching you just as carefully. He's noting whether you're keeping your hands visible, and moving hands jammed into armpits for extended periods might indicate severe cold injury. He's listening to your voice during those brief exchanges. Slurred speech is an early warning sign of hypothermia. He's observing your decision-making. Are you staying near the brazier too long or worse, avoiding it entirely? Both extremes suggest judgment impairment. The partnership operates on layers of escalating intervention. First level verbal check-ins, the routine "how are you doing" exchanges. Second level direct observation, deliberately walking closer to examine your partner's condition. Third level verbal commands, "do 10 squats right now," or "show me you can grip your spear properly." Fourth level physical intervention, grabbing your partner, forcing them to move physically, preventing them from sitting down or stopping. Historians still argue whether these protocols were formally taught or emerged organically from practical necessity. Some military manuals from the period mention guards working in pairs for mutual safety, but they rarely specify the actual techniques. More likely, experienced guards pass down the wisdom informally. Watch his feet. If he starts dragging them, get to him immediately. Don't wait for him to ask for help. He won't know he needs it. There's a particular condition medieval guards called cold stupid or frost wit, what we'd recognize as mild hypothermia affecting cognitive function. A man with cold stupid seems awake and responsive, but makes increasingly poor decisions. He might take off layers because he feels hot. Paradoxical undressing, a known symptom of severe hypothermia. He might insist he's fine while clearly stumbling. He might refuse to move or eat or take any action that would help him. This is when your partnership becomes literally life-saving, because Thomas has the authority to override your impaired judgment. The protocol for cold stupid is simple movement, warmth, food in that order. If Thomas sees signs that you're declining cognitively, he first makes you move, walk faster, do exercises, anything to generate heat. If that's insufficient, he brings you to the brazier and keeps you there until you're clearly improving. If you're still impaired, he calls for the sergeant of the watch, and you get relieved early and taken to the warming area. There's no shame in this, it's recognized as medical necessity, not weakness. Your partnership also provides psychological support that's hard to quantify, but critically important. Simply knowing someone else is out here sharing your misery makes the experience more bearable. You're not alone against the cold, you're part of a team, and teams endure what individuals cannot. When you're on your 20th circuit and questioning whether you can complete 20 more, seeing Thomas still moving steadily on his route provides motivation. If he can do it, you can do it. The conversation during those brief meetings serves multiple purposes. On the surface, you're exchanging information. Thought I heard something near the south corner, but it was just wind. This keeps both guards informed about conditions across the entire wall section. On a deeper level, the conversation is a cognitive test. Can you form coherent sentences? Do you remember what you talked about at the last meeting? Are your responses appropriate to the questions Thomas is evaluating your mental state with every interaction? There's also an element of competition, though. It's rarely spoken aloud. Neither guard wants to be the one who fails, who shows weakness, who needs intervention. This competitive edge can be motivating in small doses. You push yourself a little harder because you don't want Thomas to think you can't handle it. But it can also be dangerous if it prevents you from admitting when you're genuinely struggling. Good partners balance this tension, creating an environment where you can be honest about difficulties without feeling like you're failing. Some guard pairs develop signals beyond verbal communication. A particular whistle pattern means, "I need you to come here now." Waving the spear in a specific way means, "I'm okay, just checking in." These signals work across distances where shouting would be difficult and allows for communication even when wind makes voices inaudible. The signals aren't standardized, each pair develops their own system through trial and error. The age and experience gap between partners matters. Ideally, you'd have one experienced guard paired with one newer man. The veteran knows the tricks, the warning signs, the survival strategies, and can guide the novice through their first winter on the walls. In practice, assignments are often determined more by availability than optimal pairing, so you might end up with two inexperienced guards learning together, or two veterans who both think they know best and clash over methods. Trust is essential, but not automatic. You need to believe that Thomas will actually intervene if you're in trouble, that he won't ignore warning signs because responding is inconvenient or difficult. He needs the same confidence in you. This trust builds over multiple watches through small incidents, where one partner helps the other, through shared suffering that creates bonds stronger than friendship. By midwinter, if you've been paired with the same guard repeatedly, you know his patterns as well as your own. There's a particular moment, usually around the 90-minute mark, when fatigue is deepest, when partners often end up standing together at a brazier for a few extra minutes. Neither says anything about needing the break, you just both happen to arrive at the same time and happen to linger. This unspoken accommodation, this mutual acknowledgement that you're both struggling and both deserve a moment's grace, is the partnership functioning at its best. You cover for each other in small ways, providing humanity in an inhuman situation. When your 2-hour shift finally ends and the relief guards arrive, you and Thomas descend those stairs together, neither one abandoning the other until you're both safely inside the warming area. The partnership doesn't end with the shift. You'll check on each other over the next hour, making sure the warming process happens safely, making sure no serious cold injuries are developing. This extended care, this persistence beyond formal duty, is what transforms a random pairing into something approaching brotherhood. You survived tonight partly because of Thomas. Tomorrow night he'll survive partly because of you. Neither of you will probably articulate this or feel particularly grateful in the moment you're both too cold, too tired, too focused on getting warm. But somewhere in the back of your mind you understand that having a partner changed the odds from maybe I survive to we survive together. And in the mathematics of winter guard duty, that difference is everything. Your 2-hour shift is finally mercifully ending. The relief guards are climbing the stairs, their footsteps echoing in that cold stone throat, and you feel a wave of relief so profound it's almost physical. But you're not heading to a warm bedroom with a soft mattress and heavy blankets. You're heading to the Great Hall, where off-duty guards sleep in conditions that would still qualify as brutal by any modern standard. The Great Hall is warmer than the walls, but warmer is doing a lot of work in that sentence. The Great Hall is the heart of castle life. A massive stone chamber that serves as dining room, reception area, workspace and sleeping quarters all at once. During the day, it's filled with activity, servants moving between tables, dogs scrounging for scraps, smoke from the central hearth filling the upper reaches of the vaulted ceiling. At night it transforms into a dormitory for guards, servants, lesser household members and anyone else who doesn't rate a private chamber. We're talking about 30 to 50 people sleeping in one room, all competing for the same limited warmth. The centerpiece of the hall is the hearth, not a fireplace built into a wall like you're imagining, but a massive stone platform in the center of the floor where an enormous fire burns. During winter nights, this fire is never allowed to go completely out. It's banked before everyone sleeps, meaning the wood is arranged and partially covered with ash to slow the burning, creating a bed of glowing coals that radiates heat for hours. By the time you arrive from your watch, that fire has been banked for perhaps 3 hours, and what remains is a glowing red mass that produces surprising warmth. The sleeping arrangements follow a strict hierarchy based on proximity to that hearth. The inner circle, maybe 6 to 8 feet from the fire, is claimed by senior guards' trusted household members, people with status or seniority. These positions are genuinely warm, not comfortable by modern standards, but legitimately warm enough that you could sleep in just a tunic and single blanket. This is prime real estate and it's jealously guarded. You don't get an inner circle spot unless you've earned it through years of service or happen to be particularly favoured by someone important. The middle ring, 8 to 15 feet from the hearth, is where most guards sleep. The warmth here is noticeable but not overwhelming. You can feel heat from the fire, especially on the side facing it, but your back stays cold unless you rotate periodically. This is where you'll spend your off-duty hours lying on the stone floor with whatever padding you can arrange, wrapped in a wool blanket that's been shared among too many bodies for too many seasons. The outer ring beyond 15 feet is where junior guards, servants and the truly unfortunate sleep. The fire's warmth barely reaches here. The temperature might be 10 or 15 degrees warmer than outside, which keeps you from freezing to death, but doesn't make you comfortable. People in the outer ring often wake multiple times during the night, shivering uncontrollably, and edge closer to the fire if space opens up. It's a game of musical sleeping spots that continues all night. Historians still argue whether this sleeping arrangement was formally mandated or simply evolved through social dynamics. No castle records say guards of more than 5 years' service sleep within 10 feet of the hearth, but the pattern appears consistent across multiple locations and time periods. Power structures assert themselves even in sleep arrangements, maybe especially in sleep arrangements, because proximity to warmth is a precious commodity that demonstrates your value to the organisation. The floor itself is your mattress, and it's about as comfortable as sleeping on stone sounds. Most guards have claimed a specific spot the same location night after night, and have attempted to improve it with whatever materials they could gather. Straw is the most common cushioning spread in a layer thick enough to provide some insulation from the cold stone, and some padding for your body. The straw compresses over time, becoming less effective and needs to be replaced every few weeks. It also becomes home to fleas, lice and various other parasites, but that's just accepted reality. Some guards have slightly better arrangements. A woolen mat rolled up during the day and laid out at night provides superior insulation to straw alone. A leather ground cloth underneath keeps moisture from the stone from seeping up into your bedding. A few privileged individuals have actual straw mattresses, fabric ticking, stuffed with straw and sewn shut, which are luxurious by hall standards. These items are valuable property, often inherited from guards who've died or moved on and are closely guarded. Your blanket is heavy wool, probably weighing 8 or 10 pounds, and it smells like generations of human occupation. It's damp, always damp from the moisture in the air and from the sweat of everyone who slept under it. Damp wool is still somewhat insulating, better than damp cotton or linen, but it's nowhere near as effective as dry wool. The blanket is large enough to wrap completely around your body, which is essential because you'll be sleeping in most of your clothes. Yes, you sleep clothed. Taking off your layers would mean losing body heat you fought to maintain. More practically, your clothes need to dry, and your body heat is the drying mechanism. So you lie down, still wearing your linen undertunic, your wool tunic, probably your gambeson, possibly even your leather jerkin if it's especially cold. You remove your boots, sleeping in boots restricts circulation and can lead to frostbite, but you keep your wool hose on. Your cloak serves as additional covering spread over your blanket for extra insulation. The sleeping process has a specific technique. You lie on your side knees, drawn up slightly, hands tucked against your chest or under your armpits. This fetal position minimizes surface area and conserves heat. If you're fortunate enough to have neighbors on both sides, you orient yourselves like spoons back to chest-sharing body heat. There's nothing sexual about this, it's pure survival, and nobody even comments on it. Human bodies are remarkably good heat sources, each producing about 100 watts, and clustering together multiplies that benefit. The hall is never silent. 30 or 40 sleeping people create a symphony of sounds, snoring in various pitches and rhythms, coughing, muttering the rustle of blankets as people shift position, occasional conversation when someone wakes disoriented. Dogs sleep in the hall, 2 large hunting hounds and smaller terriers, and they add their own sounds, whimpering, barking in dreams, the click of claws on stone when they move. The fire itself makes noise, occasional pops and hisses as pockets of moisture in the wood vaporize. The air quality is terrible. 40 people breathing in an enclosed space, wood smoke, dog smell, unwashed bodies, damp wool, straw beginning to rot. The air is thick and almost visible in the dim light from the banked fire. Your lungs adjust after a few minutes the same way they adjust to any persistent smell. But when you first enter from the outside, the atmosphere is almost overwhelming. This is the smell of medieval communal living, and it's probably more historically authentic than anything you'd see in a museum. Temperature management through the night is tricky. When you first lie down, you're still relatively warm from movement, and from the hot drink you consumed near the end of your watch. You might actually feel too warm for the first 15 or 20 minutes, especially if you're in a middle ring position. But as your metabolism slows, as your body settles into sleep, your temperature drops. By 4 a.m., even people in the inner circle are waking up cold, huddling closer to the dying fire, pulling blankets tighter. There's a designated firekeeper, usually a servant or junior guard, whose job is to maintain the hearth through the night. Every hour or so, this person adds a log or two to the banked coals, ensuring the fire never dies completely. This is skilled work add too much, and you create flames that could be dangerous in a room full of sleeping people add too little, and the fire dies and everyone wakes up freezing. A good firekeeper is valued highly tipped with food or ale by grateful guards who appreciate uninterrupted sleep. You're not going to sleep deeply tonight. Nobody does in the hall. You'll drift in and out, wake up cold shift position, maybe move closer to the fire if space opens up, doze off again. This fragmented sleep pattern is normal for medieval people. The concept of 8 continuous hours of unconsciousness is largely a modern invention. You'll get enough rest to function tomorrow, but you won't wake up feeling refreshed. Refreshed isn't part of winter guard duty vocabulary. Still, this is infinitely better than being on the walls. You're horizontal. You're out of the wind. There's warmth nearby. Your life is not in immediate danger. For a medieval guard in January, that qualifies as luxury. You pull your blanket tighter, tuck your hands against your chest, and surrender to whatever approximation of sleep this environment permits. Let's talk about what's under you, because the floor isn't just cold stone, it's a carefully constructed system that medieval people developed through trial and error to make sleeping on stone slightly less lethal. The Great Hall floor, like most castle interior floors, is covered in rushes, long, tough grass-like plants that are cut dried and spread in thick layers across the stone. This isn't just medieval messiness. It's intentional insulation, a renewable resource that provides multiple functions. Fresh rushes are cut in late summer when they're fully grown, then dried for weeks before being brought inside. Once dried, they're surprisingly resilient. They don't compress immediately like straw. They're somewhat water resistant, and they create air pockets that provide genuine insulation from the cold stone below. A good rush layer might be 4 to 6 inches thick when first laid down, though it compresses over time to maybe 2 or 3 inches. Still, that's 2 or 3 inches of organic material between your body and stone that's conducting cold like it's trying to win an award for it. The rushes also absorb moisture, which is crucial in the constantly damp environment of a castle. Water vapour from breathing from bodies, from wet boots and clothing, all this moisture has to go somewhere, and rushes soak it up like a sponge. This keeps the stone surface itself from becoming overtly wet, which would conduct cold even more efficiently. Of course, damp rushes are less insulating than dry rushes, and by midwinter the rush layer is probably holding a substantial amount of moisture. But even damp rushes are better than bare stone. The downside is that rushes become an ecosystem unto themselves. Food scraps fall into them, bits of bread meat, spilled ale, and decay slowly in the cold. Bones from dinners get trampled into the layers. Dogs urinate on them. Mice live in them. Fleas breed in them. By February, the rush layer is basically composting in place, generating a small amount of heat from decomposition, but also hosting an impressive variety of life forms. Medieval people dealt with this by periodically sweeping out the old rushes and laying fresh ones. But in winter, this happens less frequently, because opening doors to haul out organic material lets in cold air. Some halls add herbs to the rush layer, lavender, meadowsweet, mint, which provide pleasant scents that mask the less pleasant smells of communal living. There's some evidence that certain herbs also repel insects, though whether medieval people chose them for that purpose or just like the smell, historians still argue. What's certain is that a well-maintained hall floor smells considerably better than a neglected one, and the better halls refresh their rushes monthly even in winter. Under the rushes in many halls there's an older layer that's been compressed into something approaching. Felt, ancient rushes, trampled reeds, compacted straw all mashed together into a dense mat. This base layer is surprisingly good insulation precisely because it's so compressed that air can't move through it. Air movement conducts heat away. Still, air insulates. This ancient sublayer accumulated over years or even decades creates a genuine thermal barrier. Some castles have floors where this compressed layer is 8 or 10 inches thick, essentially an organic carpet that hasn't been removed in living memory. Your personal sleeping area, your claimed spot in the middle ring, has been improved beyond just the communal rush layer. You've brought a woolen blanket, not your covering blanket, but a thinner one that you spread on the floor as a ground cloth. This blanket has been treated with lanolin and some kind of wax, making it somewhat water resistant. It prevents moisture from the rushes below from wicking up into your clothing, and it adds another layer of insulation. This ground blanket is one of your most valuable possessions handed down from a guard who died last winter, and you guard it carefully. On top of your ground blanket, you've arranged a layer of loose straw fresher and drier than the rush base layer. You replace this straw weekly, if you can, getting fresh material from the castle stores or the stables. This straw compresses under your body weight, creating a cushion that's more psychological than practical. You're still sleeping on essentially hard surface, but it's something. The straw also provides additional insulation, and on the coldest nights you'll pull loose handfuls up over your sides, creating a nest of sorts. Some guards have managed to acquire leather or canvas, ticking basically tough fabric bags that they stuff with straw to create makeshift mattresses. These are incredibly valuable because they contain the straw, preventing it from scattering, and the ticking itself adds a layer of protection against moisture and vermin. A straw tick also elevates your body 2 or 3 inches off the floor, which doesn't sound like much but genuinely reduces heat loss to the stone. Cold air sinks, and being even slightly elevated means you're in marginally warmer air. The truly fortunate guards we're talking, senior men with decades of service, have proper palliaces, which are substantial cloth mattresses stuffed with straw wool, or even feathers if they are extraordinarily well connected. These are furniture quality items, the medieval equivalent of a good bed, and they're rare in the hall setting. Most palliaces are in private chambers upstairs where nobles sleep. Seeing one in the Great Hall marks its owner as someone significant, someone who's earned serious privileges. Your position on the floor also involves strategic considerations beyond just distance from the fire. You want to avoid being directly in front of doors where opening and closing lets in blasts of cold air. You want to avoid being under spots where roof leaks might drip. Even in winter, snowmelt and ice can find ways through roofing. You want to be near but not under the window shutters, which might leak drafts. Your chosen spot represents accumulated knowledge about the hall's microclimate, where cold collects and where warmer pockets exist. The stone walls radiate cold inward, creating vertical currents of descending cold air that pool on the floor. This means areas against walls are colder than areas toward the centre of the hall, but centre areas have more foot traffic, more likelihood of being stepped on in the dark, more exposure to dogs and other disturbances. So you end up in a compromised position, far enough from walls to avoid the worst cold sinking, close enough to have some protection from traffic. Pillows are rare and valuable. Most guards sleep with their heads on bundled clothing, your cloak rolled up your spare tunic, whatever you can arrange. Some men use their leather jerkin, which is stiff enough to hold shape and provides actual elevation for the head. A few guards have small cushions stuffed with wool or straw, but these are luxuries. The advantage of using clothing as a pillow is that your body heat warms it, so you're resting your head on something that's at least not actively cold. The sleeping surface you've created compressed ancient rushes. Fresh rushes, ground, blanket, straw, layer, possibly a tick represents cumulative insulation of maybe R2 in modern terms. That's not much. A modern sleeping pad might be R4 or R5. But it's the difference between sleeping on 20th degree Earth stone and sleeping on a surface that's maybe 30th degree or 40th degree. Combined with your covering blankets and body heat, it creates an environment where sleep is possible if not comfortable. Throughout the night, you'll adjust your bedding. You'll pull straw up around gaps where cold air is leaking in. You'll shift your ground blanket to cover a spot that's gotten damp. You'll fluff your makeshift pillow when it compresses too much. This constant minor adjustment is part of the sleeping experience. You're not settling in for 8 hours of unconsciousness. You're actively managing your immediate environment all night long. By morning, your sleeping area will be a disaster of scattered straw, displaced rushes, and damp blankets. You'll spend a few minutes tidying it, gathering straw back into place, shaking out your blankets to dry them slightly, positioning everything for the next time you need it. This maintenance is important because allowing your sleeping area to deteriorate means more cold, more discomfort, more difficulty surviving the next night. The floor beneath you has supported countless guards through countless winter nights. The rushes have absorbed decades of moisture, the straw has cushioned hundreds of bodies. The ancient compressed layer beneath holds the sweat and breath of men whose names are forgotten. You're participating in a tradition of survival that stretches back generations, sleeping in essentially the same way your grandfather's grandfather might have slept when he served his time on winter watch. It's not much, but it's enough. And enough in medieval winter is all you can hope for. You're not sleeping alone, not really. Even if you're physically separated from the nearest body by a foot or two when you first lie down, the night will change that. As temperatures drop and the fire burns lower, the sleeping guards in the Great Hall unconsciously migrate toward each other like iron filings drawn to a magnet. By 3 a.m., the middle ring around the hearth has become a mass of humanity, bodies pressed together in configurations that would be scandalous in daylight, but are simple survival at night. This isn't intimate, this isn't personal, This is thermodynamics. A single human body generates about 100 watts of heat, roughly the same as an incandescent light bulb. That heat dissipates quickly when you're isolated, radiating into cold air and conducting into cold stone. But press two bodies together, and suddenly you're sharing that heat production, creating a microclimate between you that's measurably warmer than either could achieve alone. Add a third body, a fourth, and the benefits multiply. This is why medieval people slept in groups whenever possible, not for companionship, though that might develop, but for basic thermal survival. The configuration matters. The most efficient arrangement is what we'd call spooning. One person on their side, the next person behind them, with their chest against the first person's back, and so on. This maximizes contact area while minimizing exposed surface. The person in front benefits from warmth along their entire back. The person in back benefits from a windbreak, such as it is, and from reflected heat. Neither is comfortable in the modern sense, but both are warmer than they would be separately. In practice, you end up with clusters of 3 or 4 guards sleeping in these linked configurations. You might have Thomas behind you, remember Thomas from the watch partnership. His presence warming your back, making your blanket measurably more effective, because it's trapping his heat as well as yours. In front of you might be William, an older guard who's earned a better position closer to the fire, and you're now benefiting from his proximity. Behind Thomas might be young Peter, the newest recruit who's grateful to be included in the cluster at all. The clusters shift through the night. Someone wakes up needing to urinate. There are chamber pots against the walls, though many men just step outside into the courtyard because even winter cold is preferable to the smell of a communal pot. When that person returns, the configuration has changed slightly. The person who was in front has rolled over. The person in back has moved closer to the fire. You are just finding a new position, creating a new geometry of heat sharing. By morning, you might not be sleeping near the same people you started with. Historians still argue whether this sleeping arrangement was seen as normal or somehow embarrassing. The evidence suggests it was completely unremarkable. Medieval concepts of personal space and privacy were fundamentally different from modern ones. The idea that bodies shouldn't touch that physical contact has inherent sexual meaning that you need private space to sleep. These are largely modern constructs. For medieval people, especially working people like guards, sleeping pressed against others was just what you did in winter. Nobody commented on it any more than they commented on wearing clothes. There are unwritten rules, of course. You don't sleep with your face directly in someone's back that's too intimate, and also makes breathing difficult. You keep your hands to yourself tucked against your own chest or between your knees. If you end up with an involuntary physical response, and men do regardless of context or temperature, you don't acknowledge it, and neither does anyone else. You shift slightly, adjust position, and everyone pretends nothing happened. These situations are handled through deliberate obliviousness. The heat sharing extends beyond just humans. Dogs sleep in the hall too, and they're surprisingly valuable contributors to the thermal network. A large dog generates significant heat, and their fur provides additional insulation. Guards actively encourage dogs to sleep nearby, and the dogs seeking warmth themselves are happy to comply. You might wake up with a hound pressed against your legs, its body heat warming your lower half, and you'll be grateful for it. The dog benefits from your heat, you benefit from the dogs, and nobody questions the arrangement. Some guards have semi-permanent sleeping partnerships, men who've learned they're compatible for heat sharing, and deliberately position themselves together night after night. This isn't romantic, it's practical. You learn each other's sleeping patterns adjust automatically. When one person shifts, develop an efficient heat-sharing rhythm. These partnerships might last years, dissolving only when someone leaves service, dies, or earns promotion to better sleeping quarters elsewhere in the castle. The size difference between partners matters. A large man generates more heat, but also has more surface area and loses heat faster. A smaller man generates less total heat, but has better surface area to volume ratio and retains it better. Pairing a large and small man often works well. The large man provides quantity of warmth. The small man provides efficiency. 3 medium-sized men might be more effective than 2 large ones. Medieval guards probably didn't think about it in these terms, but they definitely noticed which combinations worked best. Age factors in too. Young men sleep hot, their metabolisms run faster, they generate more heat, and they're often still warm from the day's activities. Old men sleep cold, their metabolisms have slowed, their circulation isn't as good, and they're often dealing with old injuries that affect temperature regulation. The ideal cluster might have a young man in the middle, radiating heat with older men positioned to benefit from his warmth. This isn't formally organised, but it happens naturally as people gravitate toward configurations that work. There's a phenomenon guards call the cold shift, usually happening around 4 a.m, when the fire is at its lowest and outdoor temperatures reach their minimum. Suddenly, everyone is waking up, cold, pulling blankets tighter, pressing closer together. The entire hall seems to contract, spaces between sleeping bodies disappearing as people seek any available warmth. This is when you might find yourself pressed against someone you don't know, someone from a completely different sleeping cluster, because the cold has created a temporary alliance that supersedes all social boundaries. The morning separation happens gradually as the fire is rebuilt and the hall warms. People begin to require less physical proximity. They roll away from each other, creating space, reclaiming some personal territory. Nobody discusses the night's intimate pressed-together sleeping, it's just understood as necessary, and now with dawn approaching no longer required. By the time full daylight arrives and the hall is bustling with morning activity, it's almost hard to remember how tightly everyone was clustered just hours before. Occasionally conflicts arise. Someone snores unbearably, driving away potential sleeping partners. Someone smells worse than the general baseline of medieval unwashed humanity. Someone thrashes in their sleep, constantly disturbing others. These people end up sleeping alone in the outer ring, suffering through colder nights as social punishment. The message is clear: if you want the survival benefits of group sleeping, you need to be someone others can tolerate beside them. The shared body heat isn't just physical warmth, it's psychological comfort too. Sleeping alone in the great hall, separated from others, exposed to cold on all sides, is psychologically harder than sleeping in a cluster. There's something primal about the press of bodies, something that signals safety and community. This matters for morale, for mental health, for the general capacity to endure another winter of guard duty without breaking down. When you finally wake properly in the morning, stiff and sore, you'll disentangle yourself from whoever you ended up sleeping beside. Maybe it's Thomas, maybe it's a stranger. You'll nod acknowledgement, survived another night, and begin the process of standing up, shaking life back into cold muscles. The person you shared warmth with will do the same. Neither of you will thank the other explicitly, but there's a moment of mutual recognition: we helped each other make it through. In the brutal calculus of winter survival, that shared warmth might have been the difference. Not dramatic, not the single factor that saved you, but one element in the complex system of techniques, habits and compromises that keep medieval guards alive through January nights. And you'll do it again tonight, and the night after, trading dignity and privacy for the simple animal warmth of human bodies pressed together against the cold. Let's talk about alcohol, because it's threaded through every aspect of winter guard duty, and understanding its role means understanding both its benefits and its deadly dangers. You've been drinking all night, weak ale during your watch, maybe spiced wine if the castle's feeling generous, possibly stronger spirits if someone's managed to acquire them. This isn't recreational drinking, though it might become that. This is medicinal tactical consumption of a substance that can either save your life or kill you, depending on how you use it. The ale you received during your watch was probably around 3 or 4% alcohol weak, by modern standards strong enough to provide the effects that make it valuable. That alcohol causes vasodilation, meaning your blood vessels expand slightly, allowing more blood to flow to your extremities. This is why drinking makes you feel warmer. You genuinely are getting more blood flow to your fingers and toes, to your skin, to all those peripheral areas that have been starved of circulation. For a guard on frozen walls, this improved circulation can be the difference between keeping your fingers functional and losing them to frostbite. But here's the cruel trick alcohol plays: while it makes you feel warmer, it's actually making you lose heat faster. That increased blood flow to your skin means more of your core heat is being radiated away into the cold air. Your body is essentially increasing its surface heat loss at exactly the moment when conserving heat is crucial. Medieval people didn't understand the mechanism, but experienced guards definitely understood the paradox. Drink makes you feel good, but too much drink kills you faster when you return to the cold. The optimal strategy, learned through generations of trial and error, is careful moderation during the watch itself. 1 cup of hot ale per hour consumed slowly provides just enough vasodilation to keep extremities functional without dangerously increasing heat loss. The key is the hot part. The temperature of the liquid matters as much as the alcohol content. Hot ale raises your core temperature directly, while the alcohol improves circulation. This combination genuinely helps, but only if you don't overdo it. The spiced wine you might receive during the mid-watch ration is stronger, maybe 8 to 10% alcohol, and it includes ingredients that medieval people believed helped with cold. Cinnamon, ginger, cloves, sometimes pepper. These spices create a burning sensation that tricks your brain into perceiving warmth. Modern science confirms that some of these, particularly ginger, do promote circulation. Whether medieval cooks knew this or simply noticed empirically that spiced wine worked better than plain wine, historians still argue about. What matters is that the practice was widespread and seemed effective. Spirits' actual distilled alcohol, maybe brandy or aquavitae, are rare and valuable. If they appear at all, it's in tiny amounts, a small cup shared among several guards during particularly brutal conditions. The alcohol content might be 30 or 40% high enough to provide significant vasodilation and a genuine warming sensation. But spirits are also dangerous precisely because they're so effective at making you feel invincible. A guard who's had too much brandy might take off his cloak, because he feels hot might sit down, because he feels relaxed might make any number of fatal decisions because his judgment is impaired, while his sensation of well-being is artificially elevated. The social aspect of drinking during watches is complex. Sharing a cup creates bonds, marks you, as part of the group provides psychological comfort beyond the physical effects. Refusing to drink when everyone else is drinking marks you as other, as not fully part of the team. But drinking to keep up with others, drinking to fit in, can quickly lead to drinking too much. The pressure is subtle but real. Nobody explicitly says you must drink, but the social dynamics make it difficult to abstain. There's a type of guard everyone learns to recognize: the one who drinks too much consistently every watch. He's louder than necessary, his movements are slightly uncoordinated, his judgment is questionable. Other guards watch him carefully because he's a liability more likely to fall to fail in his duties to need rescue. Over time, these heavy drinkers tend not to survive winter. Either they freeze due to impaired judgment, or they're dismissed from service, or they die from alcohol-related causes that have nothing to do with cold. Natural selection operates harshly on medieval guard forces. The morning after your watch, when you're lying in the Great Hall trying to sleep, you'll likely be given another drink, something warm and slightly alcoholic, to help you settle and sleep despite discomfort. This might be mulled ale with honey, or wine mixed with warm water, or milk with wine-added possets and caudles. Traditional warming drinks. The alcohol acts as a mild sedative, helping you slip into the fragmented sleep that's all this environment permits. But again, moderation matters too much, and you'll wake up dehydrated and with a headache that makes the next watch even more miserable. Dehydration is a real concern, ironically, even in cold conditions. Your body is losing moisture constantly through breathing in dry winter air, through whatever minimal sweating happens despite the cold, through urination that's more frequent when you're cold. Alcohol is a diuretic, it makes you urinate more, which accelerates dehydration. Medieval guards had to balance the benefits of alcohol against the need for hydration, and this usually meant alternating alcoholic drinks with water or weak ale that's barely alcoholic at all. The quality of the alcohol matters enormously. Good ale, properly brewed and relatively fresh, is safe and beneficial. Bad ale, contaminated or spoiled, can make you sick in ways that are catastrophic when you're already stressed by cold. Medieval brewing wasn't perfectly reliable, and occasional batches would be off in ways that modern sanitation has eliminated. Guards drinking from a contaminated batch might spend their watch dealing with intestinal distress on top of everything else, which is about as miserable as human experience gets. Wine has social implications. Ale is common workers' drink, what everyone gets. Wine is more expensive, more prestigious. Receiving wine during your watch suggests the castle is well supplied and values its guards. The spiced wine is even more significant. Spices were expensive imported luxuries. A castle that provides spiced wine to guards is demonstrating either great wealth or great respect for its garrison, or both. Guards notice these signals and discuss them, comparing their treatment with what they've heard about other castles, other lords. There's a ritual element to the drinking too. The cup is passed sometimes with a brief toast or acknowledgement to warmth, someone might say, or to surviving the night. These small ceremonies matter. They mark moments in the watch, provide structure to the long cold hours, create shared experiences that bond the guard force together. The drinking isn't just about the physical effects of alcohol, it's about participation in a tradition, affirmation of membership in a group that's facing hardship together. Some castles have guard commanders who carefully monitor alcohol distribution, rationing it to prevent overconsumption. Others are more lax, trusting guards to self-regulate. The results, a predictable, tightly controlled distribution leads to more functional guards, but lower morale. Loose distribution leads to higher morale, but more incidents of intoxication. The best commanders find a middle way, providing enough alcohol to be beneficial, while maintaining enough oversight to prevent disasters. The morning after a watch, you'll feel the effects of whatever you drank. Not necessarily drunk, you probably didn't consume enough for that, but slightly foggy, slightly dehydrated, slightly off. This is normal, expected part of the recovery process. You'll drink water or weak ale through the morning, rehydrating, allowing your body to process the alcohol and eliminate it. By afternoon, you'll be more or less normal, ready to face another watch that night. The relationship between guards and alcohol is therefore complicated. It's tool, comfort, danger, and social lubricant all at once. Used correctly, it genuinely helps you survive winter nights. Used incorrectly, it kills you faster than the cold alone would. Every guard has to learn where that line is, and some learn too late. The ones who survive multiple winters are usually the ones who figured out how to use alcohol as an ally, rather than letting it become an enemy. So when you accept that cup of hot spiced ale during your watch, you're not just drinking. You're participating in a complex survival strategy that's been refined over centuries, consuming a substance that's both medicine and poison-making, calculated decisions about immediate comfort versus long-term survival. And you're doing it in the dark on a frozen wall, with your life depending on getting the balance right. No pressure. The stables are paradoxically one of the warmest places in the castle during winter nights. And if you're assigned to stable watch rather than wall duty, you've essentially won the guard rotation lottery. But let's be clear, you're still cold, still uncomfortable, still enduring conditions that would horrify modern people. It's just that you're doing it surrounded by large mammals that are essentially biological furnaces, and that makes all the difference in the world. A horse is a magnificent heat generator. An adult horse, maybe 1,000 to 200 pounds, produces somewhere around 500 watts of heat, roughly 15 times what a human produces. That heat radiates from the animal's body, constantly warming the air around it, and in the confined space of a stable that warmth accumulates. Add 10 or 15 horses to a reasonably enclosed building, and you've created an environment that might be 40 or 50 degrees Fahrenheit, even when it's 20 degrees outside. That's the difference between genuinely dangerous cold and merely uncomfortable cold. The stable building itself is designed with some consideration for the animal's needs, which coincidentally benefits you. The walls are thicker than a typical barn, often stone, at least partway up to prevent horses from kicking through. The roof is lower than you'd find in a storage barn, which means less air volume to heat. There are fewer windows and openings than in summer structures, and in winter these are often stuffed with straw or covered with leather to reduce drafts. None of this is designed for human comfort, it's about keeping valuable horses healthy, but the result is a space that retains animal heat remarkably well. The horses themselves are standing or lying on deep straw bedding, often a foot or more thick. This straw serves multiple purposes: cushioning for the horse's legs, absorption for manure and urine, and crucially insulation from the cold floor. The decomposition of manure mixed with urine-soaked straw generates additional heat through bacterial action, essentially hot composting, happening right under the horses. This isn't pleasant smelling, but it's genuinely warm. The lower portions of the stable, where gases settle and decomposition is most active, might be noticeably warmer than the upper areas. Your guard duty in the stable is officially about protecting valuable horses from theft, ensuring they don't injure themselves during the night and being present in case of an emergency, like a fire or a horse becoming cast lying down in a position where it can't get up on its own. In practice, it's also about staying alive through the night in the most comfortable conditions available to a common guard. You're not patrolling walls, you're mostly sitting or standing in an enclosed space surrounded by heat sources that occasionally nuzzle you looking for treats. The positioning within the stable matters. The horses are in stalls or tied to posts in rows, and you want to station yourself centrally where you can benefit from multiple animals' heat. The far corners might be marginally colder. The area right next to the main door is definitely colder because opening and closing lets in outside air. The best position is often near the tack room or feed storage area, where there's additional insulation from stored materials, and you're surrounded by horses on multiple sides. Historians still argue whether stable guard duty was formally recognised as easier, or whether the assignment just quietly went to favoured guards. The evidence suggests both some castles explicitly rotated guards through stable duty, as a reward for good service, or to allow recovery from illness, while other castles simply had certain men who always ended up on stable watch through informal arrangements. Either way, if you've been assigned here tonight instead of the walls, someone thinks well of you, or you've been very lucky. The horses themselves are surprisingly tolerant of human presence. They're accustomed to groomed stable hands and various people moving around them constantly. A guard settling in for the night watch doesn't particularly disturb them. Some horses are more social than others. The old campaigners, the ones who've been around humans their entire lives, might actually seem to enjoy the company. They'll occasionally turn their heads to look at you, make soft huffing sounds, shift position, in ways that feel almost communicative. You can actually lean against a horse if you position yourself correctly. Standing beside a large warm blood or destrier pressing your side against the animal's flank, you absorb heat directly through contact. The horse's hide is warm, radiating that 1500 watts of metabolic energy, and your cold body soaks it up gratefully. The horse might shift slightly, acknowledging your presence, but most don't seem to mind. You're not heavy enough to bother them, and they're used to humans touching them. This direct contact can warm you in ways that even a brazier can't match. The smell is intense horse sweat, manure, urine-soaked straw leather from tack oats, and hay from feed, the general must of an enclosed animal space. To modern sensibilities, it would be overwhelming. To a medieval guard, it's just the smell of warmth and relative safety. Your nose adjusts within minutes, and soon you barely notice it. The smell of the stable becomes associated with relief, with not freezing, with surviving another night. Some guards probably found it comforting in the way that familiar smells become comforting regardless of their objective pleasantness. You're not alone in recognizing the stable's advantages. Dogs are here too. Castle dogs that have learned the stable is warmer than the hall on the coldest nights. Cats live here permanently, hunting the mice and rats that are attracted to grain stores. The stable develops its own small ecosystem of creatures, all seeking warmth and shelter. You might find yourself sharing space with 2 or 3 dogs, several cats, and occasionally other guards who've found excuses to check on the horses or deliver messages, any reason to spend a few minutes in the warmth. The sounds are different from the hall. Horses breathe deeply, a rhythmic sound that's almost meditative. They shift weight from hoof to hoof, making quiet thuds on the straw. Occasionally one will snort or blow air through its nostrils. They chew. Horses that have access to hay will munch periodically through the night, and the sound of large teeth grinding plant matter is oddly soothing. It's an active silence full of life and presence, completely unlike the dead silence of an empty wall walk. Your duties are light enough that you can actually sit for extended periods, something that would be fatal on the walls. You might sit on a hay bale or on a wooden stool if one's available, positioned where you can see the main entrance and monitor the horses. Sitting in the stable isn't dangerous the way sitting on the walls is because the ambient temperature is so much higher. You're not fighting active hypothermia, you're just cold in the normal way humans are cold in winter, which is manageable and non-fatal. The risk of fire is real and constantly mentioned. Hay and straw are incredibly flammable. A knocked-over lantern, an ember from someone's pipe, even spontaneous combustion from improperly stored damp hay. Any of these could turn the stable into an inferno within minutes. The horses would panic, potentially killing themselves trying to escape. The building might be destroyed. Your job includes vigilance against fire, which means staying alert even though the warm environment makes drowsiness tempting. This is the trade-off: comfort in exchange for the responsibility of protecting valuable animals and property. Some guards bring handiwork to stable duty, mending leather straps, sharpening knives, any task that can be done by candlelight and doesn't require extensive space. This is technically not allowed. You're supposed to be focused on guard duties, but in practice it's tolerated because keeping your hands busy keeps you awake and alert. The repetitive motion of working leather or sharpening steel becomes meditative, the hours passing more easily than they would in idle vigilance. The horses sometimes dream. You'll see them lying down, eyes moving beneath closed lids, legs twitching as if running. Occasionally one whinnies softly in sleep. These moments of animal vulnerability remind you why you're here. These creatures are valuable, important to the castle's military capability and economic stability, and they need protection just like the walls need guards. Your comfort is incidental to their safety, but you benefit nonetheless. By morning, when your watch ends and you step outside the stable into the winter dawn, the temperature shock is profound. You've acclimated to the relative warmth, and the outside air feels colder than it did before your watch began. But you've survived the night without frostbite, without the grinding exhaustion of constant movement, Without the psychological toll of isolation on frozen walls, you're tired. Certainly staying alert for 6 or 8 hours is draining regardless of conditions, but you're intact, functional, and profoundly grateful. Stable duty isn't glorious. You'll smell like horse. For the next day, your clothes permeated with the scent of manure and animal sweat. Other guards might tease you about having the easy assignment, but you'll sleep better in the hall afterwards, and when the duty rotations come around again, you'll hope desperately to see your name next to stables rather than East Wall or North Tower. Because in the brutal hierarchy of winter guard duty, being surrounded by warm horses is about as good as it gets. Let's talk about what happens in your head during these endless cold nights, because the psychological battle is often harder than the physical one. You can train your body to endure cold, you can layer clothing and drink hot ale and keep moving, but you can't easily escape your own thoughts. And when you're standing on a frozen wall at 2 a.m, with 2 more hours until relief, your mind becomes either your greatest enemy or your most important survival tool. The first challenge is boredom. Nothing is happening. You're walking the same 60-foot stretch of wall for the 100th time tonight, seeing the same stone merlons, the same dark landscape beyond, hearing the same wind. Modern people vastly underestimate how boring medieval life could be, especially for guards whose job consists of standing in one place for hours watching for threats that almost never materialize. Your mind, desperate for stimulation, will latch onto anything: a slight sound, a shadow that might be movement, imagined threats that feel real in the darkness. This is where mental discipline separates survivors from casualties. You need to keep your mind occupied without becoming so absorbed that you miss genuine threats. Experienced guards develop techniques, mental games that pass time without completely disconnecting from reality. Counting is popular. Count your steps, count circuits, count stones in the wall section, count anything countable. The act of counting occupies just enough mental bandwidth to prevent mind-numbing boredom without fully absorbing your attention. Prayer is another common strategy, and it serves multiple purposes beyond religious devotion. Reciting prayers, Pater Noster, Ave Maria, various psalms provide structure to time. You know roughly how long each prayer takes, so completing 10 repetitions means approximately 10 minutes have passed. The familiar words require just enough concentration to keep your mind from wandering into dangerous territory, while the repetitive nature becomes almost meditative. Whether you're genuinely devout or simply pragmatic, prayer works as a mental survival technique. Some guards memorize songs, poems, or stories and recite them mentally during watches. This requires more preparation. You need to have actually memorized substantial material, but it's incredibly effective at making time pass. A long ballad might occupy 5 or 10 minutes. Run through your repertoire of memorized material and suddenly an hour has vanished. Historians still argue whether guards commonly memorized material specifically for this purpose or simply drew on cultural knowledge everyone possessed, but the practice was definitely widespread. The mental games get more elaborate. You might mentally walk through every room of a house you once lived in, remembering details of layout and decoration. You might recall every person you've ever met, reconstructing their faces and voices. You might plan elaborate fantasies, what you'd do if you suddenly inherited money, where you'd travel, what you'd eat. These extended imaginative exercises can occupy significant time and make watches more bearable as long as you maintain enough awareness to snap back to reality if something actually happens. The darkness itself becomes a psychological challenge. Humans are not nocturnal creatures. We're uncomfortable in complete darkness, evolutionarily programmed to perceive it as dangerous. Standing in darkness for hours triggers primitive fears that rational thinking can't fully suppress. Every shadow might be a threat. Every sound might be an enemy. Your imagination conjures threats that aren't there, and you have to constantly talk yourself down from false alarms. This is mentally exhausting in ways that are hard to explain to anyone who hasn't experienced it. Around the 90-minute mark of your watch, you often hit what guards call the dark hour, a period of profound psychological difficulty when time seems to stop, when the remaining watch stretches out like an eternity, when continuing feels impossible. This isn't hypothermia, though cold contributes. It's pure psychological crisis, your mind rebelling against continued hardship. Experienced guards recognize this phase and have strategies. Change your mental game. Do some physical exercises, move to the brazier if you're not already there, anything to break the psychological pattern. Loneliness is real even when you're not technically alone. Yes, Thomas is 30 feet away on his own patrol route, but you're both isolated in your individual experiences of cold and time. The brief interactions when your routes cross provide momentary connection, but then you're alone again with your thoughts. Humans are social creatures, and this enforced isolation in harsh conditions is psychologically taxing. Some guards cope by having imaginary conversations, talking to themselves quietly, anything to break the silence inside their heads. The temptation to just give up, to stop caring, to let whatever happens happen, this is perhaps the most dangerous mental state. It's not quite suicidal ideation, more like a profound apathy, a bone-deep exhaustion with the entire situation. Guards who slide into this mental state often sit down, stop moving, make decisions that lead to freezing. Fighting off this apathy requires constant mental effort, constantly reminding yourself why you're doing this, constantly choosing to keep going when every part of you wants to stop. Historians still argue whether medieval people experienced mental health challenges the way modern people do, or whether their psychological landscape was fundamentally different. What's certain is that records mention guards becoming melancholic, losing their wits, becoming unable to continue service. These descriptions probably encompass everything from PTSD to depression to cold-induced delirium, but they confirm that the psychological toll of winter guard duty was recognized even if not fully understood. Some guards develop little superstitions or rituals that provide psychological comfort. Touching a particular stone each circuit, saying a specific phrase at each brazier carrying a religious token, and touching it at regular intervals, these actions have no practical benefit, but they provide structure markers of progress through the watch, small moments of agency in a situation where you have very little control. The rituals become important, not for what they do, but for what they represent your ability to impose order on chaos. Memory becomes unreliable during these long cold watches. You'll find yourself unable to remember whether you've completed 10 circuits or 12. Time distorts 5 minutes can feel like 30, or 30 minutes can pass in what feels like 5. This temporal confusion is partly cold-related cognitive impairment, partly the natural distortion that happens during boring repetitive activities. It's disorienting and adds to the general sense of unreality that pervades late-night watches. You think about warmth obsessively, not just wanting to be warm, but detailed fantasies about specific forms of warmth. Sitting in front of a roaring fire in summer, lying in a sunny field, the warmth of a woman's body, though this thought is dangerous because it leads to other thoughts that make the watch harder. The warmth of your mother's kitchen when you were a child. These thermal memories are visceral, almost painful in their intensity, and you have to be careful not to lose yourself in them completely. Fear is present but usually manageable. You're not terrified of freezing to death in some acute panic. It's more a low-level anxiety, a background awareness that you're in a genuinely dangerous situation and need to stay vigilant. This anxiety actually helps. It keeps you alert, prevents complacency, motivates you to keep moving and stay warm. Too much fear becomes paralyzing, but the right amount is valuable. Most guards find equilibrium maintaining enough fear to stay functional without becoming overwhelmed. Hope sustains you. Hope that your relief will arrive on time. Hope that tomorrow will be warmer. Hope that winter will eventually end. Hope that you'll survive to see spring. These aren't grand hopes. You're not dreaming of wealth or glory. You're hoping for basic things: warmth, rest, survival. But these simple hopes are powerful motivators. They provide reason to keep moving, keep enduring, keep choosing survival over surrender. By the time your watch finally ends, you're not just physically exhausted, you're mentally depleted. You've fought battles no one saw, overcome challenges. No one recorded, exercised discipline and willpower for hours on end. The mental exhaustion is often worse than the physical fatigue, and it's slower to recover from. You'll carry it into your rest period, into your sleep, and it'll still be there when you wake up. Managing this psychological toll over an entire winter watch after watch, week after week, requires mental toughness that's hard to quantify but absolutely essential. The guards who make it through winter are often not the strongest or the best equipped. They're the ones who figured out how to manage their minds, who developed psychological strategies that kept them functional when their bodies were failing. The mental game is at least half the battle, and possibly more than half. Master your mind and you might survive. Lose control of your thoughts, and the cold becomes secondary. You'll defeat yourself long before the temperature defeats you. Now we need to talk about the ones who didn't make it, because for all the strategies, all the techniques, all the careful management of cold and exhaustion, some guards didn't survive winter. They were found at dawn frozen at their posts, and their deaths became cautionary tales that rippled through every castle garrison in Christendom. These weren't theoretical dangers, these were real men with real names who went on watch one night and never came back down those stairs alive. The most common scenario is almost banal in its simplicity. A guard sits down. Maybe he's exhausted beyond endurance. Maybe he's convinced himself that just 1 minute of rest won't hurt. Maybe he's already hypothermic enough that his judgment is impaired, and sitting seems perfectly reasonable. He settles onto that stone bench we talked about earlier, or against a merlon, or just on the wall-walk itself. The cold stone immediately begins draining his remaining body heat. Within minutes he's dangerously hypothermic. Within 15 or 20 minutes he's unconscious. By morning he's dead. The truly disturbing cases are the ones found standing. A guard will be discovered upright at his post spear, still in hand, seemingly on watch, except he's frozen solid. This happens when hypothermia progresses to the point where the body enters a kind of suspended state, not quite dead, but no longer alive in any meaningful sense. The muscles freeze in position, rigor mortis accelerated by the cold, and the body remains upright even after consciousness and life have departed. These frozen sentinels become ghost stories, tales told in hushed voices in barracks across Europe. Historians still argue about the actual frequency of these deaths. Some chronicles mention them specifically 3 guards lost to winter in a particular year, while others are silent, and silence might mean either no deaths occurred or deaths were so common they weren't worth recording. The best estimate, based on fragmentary evidence, suggests that a typical castle might lose 1 or 2 guards to cold each winter, with particularly brutal winters claiming more. That might not sound like many until you remember that garrisons were small, maybe 20 to 40 guards total, so losing even 1 or 2 represents a significant percentage. The signs of impending death are now recognisable to experienced sergeants, though medieval people lacked modern medical terminology to describe them. A guard who's becoming incoherent, who's stumbling without obvious cause, who's making irrational decisions, these are indicators of severe hypothermia. The classic sign is paradoxical undressing, where the victim feels burning hot and starts removing clothing. This happens because hypothermia eventually causes blood vessels to dilate uncontrollably, briefly flooding cold skin with warm blood from the core, creating a sensation of intense heat. A guard found removing his cloak at 2 a.m. in January is probably minutes from death. The protocol for discovering a frozen guard is grim and practical. First check for any sign of life, breath, pulse, warmth. If none are found, the body is left in place until daylight. Moving a frozen corpse in darkness risks injuring whoever attempts it, and there's no urgency, the dead aren't getting more dead. At dawn, several men return with tools to chip away ice if the body is frozen to stone, to pry frozen fingers from weapons, to carry the rigid corpse down narrow stairs. It's difficult, unpleasant work, and it affects morale profoundly. The causes of death are investigated not with modern forensic precision but with practical intent. Could this have been prevented? If a guard froze because he was drunk, that becomes a lesson about alcohol limits. If he froze because he sat down, that reinforces the prohibition against sitting. If he froze because his partner failed to monitor him properly, there are consequences for that partner. These investigations aren't about justice, they're about preventing the next death. Some deaths are more mysterious. A guard found frozen with no obvious explanation. He didn't sit, he wasn't drunk, he was apparently doing everything right. These cases terrify other guards, because they suggest that perfect compliance with all protocols still isn't enough, that the cold can claim you anyway. In reality, these deaths probably involve medical conditions, heart attacks, strokes, aneurysms that coincided with extreme cold, but to medieval people they seemed random, arbitrary proof that survival involved luck as much as skill. The disposal of frozen bodies presents practical challenges. The ground is frozen too hard to dig graves, so bodies are often stored in outbuildings until spring thaw permits burial. Some castles have designated winter dead storage areas, essentially cold rooms where corpses are stacked like cordwood, preserved by the same cold that killed them. This seems horrific by modern standards, but was practical necessity. The alternative, trying to dig frozen ground or disposing of bodies in other ways, was either impossible or unacceptable. The emotional impact on surviving guards is significant. These dead men were colleagues, sometimes friends, people you shared watches with, ate, with slept beside in the great hall. Their deaths are reminders of your own vulnerability, proof that this isn't a theoretical danger, but a real one. Some guards become more cautious, almost paranoid, following every protocol religiously. Others become fatalistic, figuring that if death is random anyway, there's no point in extra effort. Both responses are understandable. Neither is entirely healthy. There are stories, and historians can't determine which are true and which are embellishments, about guards who seemed to know they were going to die. Men who gave away possessions the night before a fatal watch, who said farewells that seemed too final, who just somehow knew. Whether these are genuine premonitions, observable signs of illness that medieval people interpreted mystically, or retrospective narrative construction by survivors, we can't determine. But the stories persist, adding supernatural elements to what were probably natural deaths. The families of guards who froze to death received compensation. Usually castle, lords recognised an obligation to widows and children, though the actual amounts varied wildly. Some widows received full wages for a year. Others received token payments. Some received nothing beyond whatever the dead guard had accumulated. There was no standardised death benefit system, just individual arrangements based on the lord's generosity and the guard's service record. This uncertainty added another layer of anxiety. If you die on watch, will your family be cared for? Certain locations within castles develop reputations as particularly deadly. A specific tower, a particular stretch of wall, places where multiple deaths have occurred over years. Guards hate being assigned to these locations, not necessarily because they're objectively more dangerous, but because the psychological weight of knowing 3 men froze here makes every watch more difficult. The fear becomes self-fulfilling. You're more anxious, you sleep worse beforehand, you're less functional during the watch, and you're therefore at higher risk. Some guards develop rituals around dead colleagues. Touching a stone where someone died, saying a prayer at the location, avoiding certain spots entirely. These behaviours are attempts to manage the psychological trauma of proximity to death. Medieval Christianity provided frameworks for thinking about death and the afterlife that probably helped giving meaning to what otherwise seemed senseless. Whether you genuinely believed in heavenly reward or just found comfort in familiar rituals, religion served a psychological function. The question everyone thinks, but rarely voices, what would you do if you found a colleague frozen but not quite dead? Modern medical knowledge says you should rewarm, slowly avoid rubbing frozen tissue, get them to warmth gradually. Medieval knowledge said various things, much of it incorrect, some of it actively harmful. In practice, guards would probably drag a frozen colleague to the nearest fire and hope for the best. Sometimes this worked. Severe hypothermia can be reversible if caught early enough. Sometimes it didn't, and well-meaning rescue attempts hastened death. There's a particularly dark piece of practical wisdom that circulates among guards. If you find someone frozen and unconscious, don't waste energy trying to save them if your own survival is at risk. This sounds callous, but it's pragmatic. 2 dead guards don't help anyone. You're supposed to get help, raise the alarm, let others attempt rescue while you maintain your own safety. Whether guards actually followed this principle or risked themselves trying to save colleagues, we don't know. Probably it varied by individual, by circumstances, by how much you liked the frozen guard. By spring, when the last snow melts and temperatures rise above freezing consistently, there's often a memorial service for those lost to winter. Names are read, prayers are said, and survivors feel a complex mixture of grief, relief, and guilt. Why did they die while you survived? Was it luck, skill, divine favour, random chance? These questions don't have satisfying answers, but they need to be asked, acknowledged, grappled with. The memorial provides closure of sorts, though the memories of frozen faces and rigid bodies will persist much longer. The deaths serve a purpose grimly. They reinforce the seriousness of winter guard duty. Every new recruit hears about the guards who froze, learns the exact details of how they died, internalizes the lesson that this job can kill you. This institutional memory, passed down through stories of specific deaths, keeps guards vigilant in ways that abstract warnings never could. Fear motivated by real examples is more powerful than fear based on hypotheticals, and so the watch continues night after night, winter after winter. More guards will freeze, their names will be added to the list, new cautionary tales will be told, and the survivors will keep climbing those stairs, walking those walls, fighting the cold, because that's what guards do. Some will die doing it, most won't. But all will live with the knowledge that they might be next, and that knowledge shapes every decision, every action, every frozen breath on every winter night. Not everyone faces the same winter. The cold doesn't care about rank or age or years of service, but castle society certainly does, and the way winter watch duty gets distributed reveals everything about medieval social hierarchy. If you're young expendable or out of favour, You're on the exposed walls in the coldest hours. If you're senior valuable or well connected, you've got the gatehouse duty or the stable watch. This isn't officially written down anywhere, it's just how things work and everyone understands it. Let's start with age, because it matters enormously. A man of 20 has advantages in cold that a man of 50 simply doesn't possess. Your metabolism runs hotter when you're young. Your circulation is better. Your body generates more heat and loses it more slowly. You recover faster from cold exposure. You have more muscle mass, and muscle generates metabolic heat. Simply put, young men survive winter watches better than old men. And castle commanders know this, even if they don't understand the physiology behind it. So the youngest guards, men in their late teens and early 20s, get assigned to the worst positions. The north wall, which never sees sun, even in winter daylight. The highest towers most exposed to wind. The longest watches 4 hours instead of 2. The pre-dawn shifts when temperatures hit their lowest. This seems cruel, and it is cruel, but it's also pragmatic. These young men have the best chance of surviving these brutal assignments. Sending a 50-year-old guard to the north wall for 4 hours at 3 a.m. isn't just hard on him, it's likely to kill him. The older guards, men in their 40s and 50s who've survived decades of service, get the cushier assignments. Gatehouse duty, which is enclosed and relatively warm. Stable watch surrounded by heat-generating horses. Shorter shifts 2 hours maximum. Earlier evening watches before temperatures drop to their nadir. They've earned these considerations through years of service, yes, but they also require them. Their bodies simply can't handle what they could handle at 20. This isn't weakness, it's reality. Historians still argue whether this age-based assignment system was formalized or emerged organically, but evidence suggests it was universal across medieval castles. Every garrison recognized that older guards needed protection from the worst conditions, both as reward for service and as practical necessity. An experienced guard who freezes to death represents lost institutional knowledge, lost training investment, lost leadership. Better to preserve the veterans and spend the young men, harsh as that sounds. But age isn't the only factor. Rank matters enormously. A sergeant, even a young sergeant, doesn't patrol open walls. He does rounds checking on subordinates, spending a few minutes at each position before moving to the next. He's moving constantly, which generates heat, but he's never exposed for hours at a time. He probably has access to the best cold weather gear, first pick of the braziers priority for hot drinks. His experience and leadership are too valuable to risk on routine exposure duty. The lowest ranked guards, new recruits, men working off debts, criminals serving sentences through military service get the worst of everything. The coldest positions, the longest watches, the poorest equipment, the last access to warming areas. They're disposable in the castle's calculus. If one freezes, he can be replaced. This seems monstrous by modern standards, but medieval social structures operated on explicit hierarchies where some lives were simply worth more than others. Nobody pretended otherwise. There's a middle tier of ordinary guardsmen who've served long enough to prove competent, but haven't achieved any special status. You're probably in this category. You get rotated through various positions, sometimes the walls, sometimes gatehouse, occasionally stable duty if you're lucky. Your equipment is adequate, your access to warmth is fair, your treatment is neither privileged nor deliberately harsh. You're the backbone of the garrison, and you're treated accordingly, not coddled, not abused, just used as needed to keep the castle defended. Favour matters as much as rank. A guard who's related to someone important, nephew of the castle marshal, cousin of a knight, son of a prosperous merchant with connections, finds himself assigned to better positions regardless of age or experience. This isn't fair, but medieval society didn't pretend to be fair. Who you knew, who you were related to, who owed your family favours, these connections determined your treatment as much as your actual competence. A well-connected guard might never patrol the exposed walls all winter, while an equally capable guard with no connections does nothing but. Physical condition influences assignments too. A guard recovering from illness might get lighter duty temporarily. A guard with an old injury that makes prolonged standing difficult might be assigned to positions where sitting is permissible. Conversely, a guard who's shown himself to be particularly hardy, who seems immune to the cold, will find himself assigned to the worst positions repeatedly precisely because he can handle them. Capability becomes punishment in its own way. You're good at surviving the North Wall, so you get the North Wall every rotation. There are also punishment assignments. A guard who's displeased a superior, who's shown up drunk, who's failed at some duty, might find himself assigned to the coldest, most exposed position for a week straight. This serves as both punishment and warning to others step out of line, and you'll freeze for it. The threat of bad assignments maintains discipline as effectively as any formal punishment system. Everyone knows that displeasing the sergeant means spending your next 10 watches on the worst walls, and that knowledge keeps most guards in line. Women, and let's acknowledge they existed in castles, even if rarely, as guards had their own relationship with winter cold. Servants, laundresses, kitchen workers, they weren't on wall duty, but they faced cold in their own contexts. Fetching water from frozen wells, washing in water that froze your hands, working in kitchens that were warm, near the fire but freezing everywhere else. Their winter suffering was different from guards, but not necessarily less severe. The social hierarchy extended to how winter hardship was distributed among all castle inhabitants. The lord himself, of course, barely experiences the same winter as his guards. He has a private chamber with its own fireplace, heavy tapestries, insulating the walls, glass in the windows, multiple layers of the finest clothing. He might be cold by modern standards, but he's incomparably comfortable compared to the guard standing on his walls. This isn't hypocrisy exactly. Everyone accepts that social hierarchy means different experiences, but it creates a certain bitterness among guards who freeze while nobles complain about drafts in their chambers. There's an unspoken contract underlying this hierarchical system: endure the hardship now, and you'll eventually age into better positions. Survive the brutal North Wall at 20, and by 40, you'll have the gatehouse in winter. Pay your dues in youth, reap benefits in age. This promise, not guaranteed but generally honoured, makes the system tolerable. Young guards accept harsh treatment partly because they see older guards receiving consideration, proving the system eventually rewards survival. But the contract can break. A castle that loses too many guards might have insufficient older men to fill cushy positions, meaning nobody gets the expected rewards. A new lord with different priorities might disrupt traditional arrangements. Economic problems might lead to reduced garrison size, eliminating the better positions entirely. When the implicit promises fail, when young guards realise they might never age into better treatment, morale collapses and guard forces become unreliable. Some guards game the system, finding ways to avoid the worst assignments without officially violating any rules, claiming illness convincingly, cultivating relationships with people who control assignments, volunteering for unpleasant non-guard duties that at least keep you inside, bribing sergeants with shares of wages or goods. This informal economy of favour trading and position bartering operates underneath the official assignment system, and everyone participates to some degree. Complete honesty means suffering unnecessarily, and medieval people were pragmatic about such things. The result is that two guards of the same nominal rank might have vastly different winter experiences. One well-connected and clever about managing assignments spends winter mostly in sheltered positions, finishing the season intact and healthy. Another, friendless and unlucky, spends winter on exposed walls and emerges damaged, frostbitten fingers, recurring illness, psychological trauma. Both served, both did their duty, but the outcomes are profoundly unequal. Medieval life offered no pretense of equal treatment, and winter amplified every existing inequality. Understanding this hierarchy is crucial to understanding how guards survived winter. It wasn't just individual techniques and strategies, it was also about where you fell in the social structure, who protected you, who exploited you. Your survival odds were determined partly by your actions and partly by factors completely beyond your control: your age, your family connections, your relationship with superiors, your position in the complex web of medieval social relations. So when we ask, how did guards survive winter? Part of the answer is many didn't, and those who did often survived because someone else suffered the worst exposures in their place. This isn't inspiring or heroic, it's just honest winter survival in medieval castles was a zero-sum game where some people's comfort depended on other people's suffering, and social hierarchy determined who froze and who didn't. When preventive measures fail and a guard shows signs of serious cold injury, medieval castles have emergency procedures that are part practical medicine, part folk wisdom, and part desperate improvisation. You need to understand these protocols because you might need them for a colleague or someone might need to use them on you. Some of these techniques are surprisingly effective, others are useless or actively harmful. Medieval people couldn't always tell the difference, but they tried, and sometimes trying was enough. The first sign of trouble is usually the hands or feet. A guard complains he can't feel his fingers, or you notice his hands have gone from red to white to a disturbing greyish yellow. This is frostbite progressing through stages, and the response needs to be immediate. The affected guard is pulled from watch. regardless of protocol or convenience. Frostbitten extremities are an emergency that supersedes normal duty rotations. He's brought to the nearest heat source, usually the Great Hall, and the warming process begins. Here's where medieval practice diverges sharply from modern medicine. The instinct is to thrust frozen hands directly into fire to warm them as quickly as possible. This feels right. Cold is the problem, heat is the solution. Maximum heat means maximum solution. But this is actually catastrophic. Rapid rewarming of frozen tissue causes severe damage, cell death, and often permanent injury. Medieval physicians didn't understand the cellular mechanisms, but the better informed ones knew empirically that slow warming worked better than fast warming. The protocol, when properly followed, involves lukewarm water, not hot, barely warm to the touch. The affected hands or feet are immersed in this water for 20 to 30 minutes, with fresh lukewarm water added periodically to maintain temperature. This gradual warming gives tissue time to recover without the shock of rapid temperature change. Historians still argue whether this technique was widely known or practiced only in the better-staffed castles, with access to medical knowledge, but texts describing it exist from the 13th century onward. While the warming happens, the guard experiences what's called the thaw, and it's agonizing. A sensation returns to frozen tissue pain arrives with it. Not just discomfort, but searing, burning pain that makes grown men scream and weep. This is actually a good sign. Pain means nerve function is returning, but it's almost unbearable. The guard will beg for it to stop, will try to pull his hands from the water, will need to be physically restrained by colleagues while the process continues. Medieval people had limited pain management options, maybe some wine or ale, maybe herbs like willow bark that contain aspirin-like compounds, but mostly just endurance. There's a folk remedy involving urine specifically warming frozen extremities by immersing them in fresh urine. This sounds disgusting and seems like medieval superstition, but there's actual logic to it. Fresh urine is body temperature, which makes it nearly ideal for gradual warming. It's sterile when first produced, so infection risk is minimal. It's abundantly available even in winter when water might be frozen. Is it pleasant? No. Does it sometimes work? Yes. Medieval people were pragmatic about bodily fluids in ways that modern squeamishness has forgotten. After initial warming, the affected areas need protection. Frostbitten tissue is extremely vulnerable to further injury and infection. The protocol involves wrapping the extremities loosely in clean linen, avoiding pressure that might damage fragile tissue. The guard is kept in the warmest area available, usually the Great Hall near the fire, and monitored for signs of gangrene, blackening tissue, foul smell, systemic fever. If gangrene sets in medieval medicine has only one answer: amputation. Better to lose fingers than die from spreading infection. Prevention of infection involves various poultices and salves, many of which were useless, but some of which actually helped. Honey, which has genuine antibacterial properties, appears in many recipes for treating frostbite. Rendered animal fat, which creates a barrier against contamination, was commonly applied. Garlic, which has mild antimicrobial effects, features in several remedies. Were these treatments as effective as modern antibiotics? Obviously not. Did they sometimes prevent fatal infections? Probably yes. There's a particularly brutal reality about severe frostbite. Even with successful warming and infection prevention, the tissue might die anyway. Dead tissue turns black, becomes hard, and eventually falls off, or requires surgical removal. A guard might save his life, but lose his fingers, ending his ability to hold a weapon, and effectively ending his military career. This outcome was common enough that every castle had former guards working as servants, or in other capacities men with missing fingers or toes who survived frostbite but couldn't fight anymore. For hypothermia, the condition where core body temperature drops dangerously, the protocols are different. A hypothermic guard is brought inside immediately and placed as close to the fire as safely possible. He's not immersed in water because his entire body needs warming, not just extremities. Instead, he's surrounded by warm bodies. Other guards lie beside him, pressing close, sharing body heat. He's covered with every available blanket, creating a cocoon of trapped warmth. Hot drinks are forced into him, if he's conscious enough to swallow, providing internal warming. Historians still argue about a technique that appears in some medical texts, the bed treatment, where a hypothermic victim is placed in bed with two healthy people, one on each side using their body heat for warming. This wasn't sexual, it was medical intervention, and medieval sources describe it matter-of-factly. Whether it was actually practiced in castle settings or was more theoretical. Medical knowledge is unclear, but the principle is sound. Human bodies are excellent controllable heat sources for gradual warming. There's a dangerous sign that medieval guards learn to recognise when a severely hypothermic person starts saying they feel hot, starts trying to remove clothing. This paradoxical undressing we mentioned earlier indicates that hypothermia has progressed to a critical stage. The protocol is physical restraint, literally holding the person down, preventing them from removing protective clothing, keeping them near heat whether they want it or not. Their judgment is fatally impaired, and overriding their expressed wishes might save their life. Sometimes a guard is found frozen but showing signs of life, shallow breathing, faint pulse. Medieval medicine had limited understanding of apparent death versus actual death, and mistakes were made in both directions. Some people declared dead who might have been revived. Others kept warm for hours who were genuinely dead. The general practice was, when in doubt, warm them anyway. The cost of warming a corpse was minimal compared to the tragedy of abandoning someone who might survive. Garlic appears repeatedly in cold injury remedies, and there might be something to it beyond placebo effect. Garlic has mild circulatory benefits, possibly helping with blood flow to extremities. Medieval physicians didn't know this, but they observed that guards who regularly consumed garlic seemed to recover better from cold exposure. Whether they prescribed garlic because of this observation, or for unrelated medical theories, the result was the same increased garlic consumption, which might have actually helped marginally. The psychological care is rudimentary but present. A guard who's suffered severe cold injury is frightened in pain, possibly facing permanent disability. His colleagues sit with him, share their own stories of cold injuries survived, provide reassurance that's sometimes accurate and sometimes false hope. This emotional support matters. A guard who believes he'll recover has better outcomes than one who's given up, though whether this is psychological or physiological is impossible to determine from medieval evidence. There are saints associated with cold protection, St. Sebastian, St. Nicholas, others, depending on region, and prayers to these saints are part of the emergency response. Whether you personally believe in divine intervention, or see it as psychological comfort mechanism, the prayers served a function. They gave structured response to crisis, involved the community in the victim's recovery, and provided hope when medical options were limited. The recovery period is long. A guard with serious frostbite might be off duty for weeks or months. During this time he's still fed and housed. Most castles recognise an obligation to injured guards, though the quality of care varies. He might help with light duties he can perform with injured hands, watching doors, running messages, working in kitchens. Or he might simply rest, healing what can be healed, accepting what's permanently lost. Not everyone recovers. Some cold injuries prove fatal despite all interventions. Infection spread, gangrene advances, hypothermia causes organ failure, even after apparent initial recovery. The guard who seemed to be improving declines suddenly, and dies 3 days after his injury. Medieval medicine couldn't always explain these delayed deaths, they just knew that surviving the initial cold exposure didn't guarantee long-term survival. The emergency procedures represent the best of medieval medical knowledge applied to cold injuries, combining practical experience transmitted, medical learning, folk wisdom, and desperate experimentation. Some of it worked, some didn't, but all of it represented an attempt to save lives in situations where doing nothing meant certain death. These weren't perfect solutions didn't exist, but they were solutions, and sometimes solutions were enough. And so we reach the end of our journey through those frozen medieval nights. The watch is over. The relief has arrived. The guards descend those narrow stairs one final time, returning to warmth, to rest, to the simple blessing of having survived another winter. Let yourself settle now just as they did. Feel your own warmth, your own comfort so much greater than anything they knew. Your bed is softer than their straw and rushes. Your room is warmer than their great hall. Your blankets are lighter and more effective than their heavy wool. Everything that was hard for them is easy for you. Everything they fought for you simply have. Their story fades now into the darkness they knew so well. The braziers dim, the footsteps on stone grow distant. The wind finds nothing left to push against. One by one the candles gutter out. The great hall settles into silence, broken only by the soft breathing of sleeping guards and the gentle crackle of banked embers. You're safe here, you're warm, you're protected from the cold that tested them so terribly. Let their experience drift away like smoke from a dying fire. Let their endurance become a distant memory. Let their suffering transform into respect, their survival into inspiration, their story into dreams. The walls still stand somewhere in the darkness, but you don't need to climb them tonight. Others stood those watches. Others endured those winters. Others fought the cold so that somehow across all those centuries you could lie here in comfort and warmth, learning their story before sleep takes you gently away. The medieval night deepens, the castle sleeps, the guards rest at last, and so do you. The story ends here. See you in the next video. Good night.